My wife left me for her ex-lover 3 years after the marriage, and they got into a car accident. After her new lover passed, she came back demanding I take care of her. She could not believe my reaction. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself with trumpets or warning sirens. It slips into your life wearing the face of someone you love, sits across from you at the dinner table, and asks you to pass the salt while your entire world crumbles into ash between the pepper shaker and the half-empty wine glass. I remember that Tuesday night with the kind of clarity reserved for car accidents and last words. We were eating pasta penne arrabbiata, her favorite, which I'd learned to make from a YouTube video because she once mentioned 3 years earlier on our second date that her grandmother used to make it for her when she visited Naples as a child. I remember thinking, as I watched her twirl the fork through the red sauce, that this was what marriage looked like. Small acts of remembering, tiny monuments built to prove that love existed in the details. I was wrong. I need to tell you something, Sarah said. And her voice had that particular quality that makes your stomach drop before your brain catches up, the way a doctor clears their throat before using the word malignant, or how the phone sounds different at 3 a.m. when it's bad news calling. I set down my fork. The sound it made against the ceramic plate seemed too loud, too final. Okay, I said, because what else do you say when the air in the room changes texture and you can feel your life splitting into before and after? She didn't look at me. That should have been my first clue, but I was still operating under the assumption that we were a team, that we meant something more than a grammatical convenience. She stared at her wine glass instead, at the way the light from our chandelier, the one we'd picked out together at that estate sale in Portland, laughing about how pretentious we were becoming, caught in the dark red liquid and turned it the color of garnets, or blood. I've been seeing someone, she said, and I swear to you, I heard each word separately, like they were falling one by one into water, creating ripples that would eventually become waves that would drown everything I thought I knew about my life. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat had closed up the way it does when you're trying not to cry in public, when you're fighting every instinct that tells you to scream or break something or simply cease to exist, because existing in this moment, in this reality, feels like too much to bear. It's Marcus, she continued. And now she was looking at me, and I could see something in her eyes that I'd never seen before. Not quite guilt, not quite defiance, but something in between that looked like relief. Like she'd been carrying this secret for so long that telling it, even knowing it would destroy me, felt like setting down a heavy suitcase after a long journey. Marcus. Of course it was Marcus. Marcus, the ex-boyfriend from college. Marcus, the one she'd dated for 2 years before meeting me. Marcus, who she'd assured me was just a friend when they reconnected on social media 6 months ago. Marcus, whose name had started appearing in conversations with increasing frequency, always prefaced with, "You remember Marcus, right?" As if his existence in our lives was so natural, so inevitable, that questioning it would make me seem paranoid or controlling. I remember laughing once, actually laughing, when she told me they were getting coffee to catch up. I remember saying something painfully naive like, "That's great, babe. I'm glad you're reconnecting with old friends," because I was the kind of person who believed in trust, who believed that marriage meant choosing each other every single day, who believed that love was something you built with intention and protected with honesty. I was an idiot. "How long?" I asked, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears, too calm, too level, like I was asking about the weather or inquiring about train schedules, instead of asking my wife of 3 years how long she'd been fucking someone else in the bed we'd bought together, in the life we'd supposedly built together. 4 months, she said, and at least she had the decency to wince when she said it. Maybe 5. Maybe 5. The casual uncertainty of it, the fact that she couldn't even pin down the exact timeline of her betrayal, felt like a second punch to the gut. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a drunken indiscretion that she regretted. This was a choice she'd made repeatedly, over weeks and months, a parallel life she'd constructed while I was busy being her husband, planning our future, talking about maybe starting to try for kids next year. "I'm leaving," she said. And she said it the way someone might announce they're going to the grocery store or taking up yoga. Matter of fact, decided like my opinion on the matter was irrelevant because the decision had already been made in rooms I wasn't invited into. In conversations that happened in cars after those coffee catch-ups, in text messages that were deleted before I could ever see them. I should have yelled. I should have thrown the plate against the wall. Should have demanded explanations. Should have begged or raged or done any of the things that people do when their worlds end. Instead, I just nodded. I nodded like she'd just told me something mundane, like she'd said she was changing her hair color or thinking about taking a painting class. I nodded because somewhere deep in my brain, past the shock and the numbness and the spreading feeling of unreality, I understood something fundamental. This woman sitting across from me, eating pasta I'd made for her while wearing the necklace I'd given her for our anniversary, was not the woman I'd married. Or maybe she was, and I'd just never really known her at all. When? I asked. Tomorrow, she said. I've already packed. Everything's in the car. Everything's in the car. While I'd been at work that day, sitting through meetings about quarterly projections and answering emails about client deliverables, she'd been here, in our home, packing her life into boxes and suitcases, dismantling our marriage the way you might disassemble furniture before a move methodically, efficiently, with a kind of planning that suggested this wasn't impulse, but strategy. I wondered, in that moment, how long she'd been planning this. How many mornings had she woken up next to me, knowing she was going to leave? How many times had she kissed me goodbye at the door, knowing those kisses were countdowns to an ending I wasn't aware was coming? I see, I said, and I did. I saw everything with painful clarity. Every late night she'd claimed was work, every weekend trip with girlfriends that I'd never questioned, every time she'd been distant or distracted, and I'd chalked it up to stress or hormones or anything except the truth, which was that she was already gone. Her body just hadn't left yet. She stood up then, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor we'd refinished together last summer, when we'd spent an entire weekend on our hands and knees, sanding and staining, talking about how this house was going to be filled with memories, how our kids would run across these floors someday. I'm sorry, she said, but it sounded hollow, performative, like a line she'd rehearsed in the mirror to make herself feel like less of a villain in this story she was writing. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Sorry doesn't unbreak things. Sorry doesn't rewind time, or undo choices, or make betrayal hurt less. Sorry is just a word people say when they want to feel absolved without actually having to face consequences. She walked to the door, and I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard her moving through the rooms above me, probably doing a final check to make sure she hadn't forgotten anything, her toothbrush, her favorite scarf, the framed photo of us from our honeymoon in Santorini that used to sit on her nightstand. I sat there at the table, staring at the 2 plates of pasta, at the wine glasses, at the candles I'd lit because I'd thought we were having a nice dinner. A regular Tuesday evening, in a marriage I'd believed was solid. The pasta was getting cold. The candles were burning down. And somewhere upstairs, my wife was leaving me for a man she'd loved before she ever met me. A man who apparently had never really left, who'd been waiting in the wings of her heart for his cue to return. I heard the front door open, heard her footsteps on the porch, heard the trunk of her car slam shut with a finality that echoed through the house like a gunshot. And then she was gone, just like that. 3 years of marriage, 7 years of being together, countless promises about forever and always until death do us part, all of it dissolved in the time it takes to eat dinner, in the space between passing the salt and saying goodbye. I sat there in the silence for a long time. The candles burned down to nubs. The pasta congealed on the plates. The wine in her glass left a ring on the wooden table that I knew would stain if I didn't wipe it up soon. I didn't wipe it up. I wanted the stain. I wanted the evidence. I wanted something physical and permanent to prove that this had happened, that I hadn't imagined it, that the woman I'd loved had really sat across from me in this room and calmly explained that she was choosing someone else, that I wasn't enough, that I'd never been enough. It was only later, After I'd blown out the candles and scraped the uneaten food into the trash and washed the dishes with the kind of mechanical precision that comes from shock, that I allowed myself to cry. I stood at the kitchen sink, hands submerged in soapy water, and I wept the way you weep when something dies, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet, exhausted grief of someone who knows that no amount of tears will change anything, that crying is just something you do because your body needs to expel the pain somehow, even though you know it will still be there when you're done. If you've ever been left, you know this feeling. You know the specific emptiness that comes from realizing that someone you trusted with your whole heart was quietly planning their exit while you were busy planning your future together. You know the particular shame of it, the way you replay every moment, every conversation, searching for clues you missed, evidence that you were too stupid, or too trusting, or too in love to see. I dried the dishes, put them away, turned off the lights. And then I went upstairs to sleep alone in a bed that suddenly felt enormous, in a house that echoed with absence, in a life that had become unrecognizable in the span of a single dinner. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of silence, of rebuilding, of learning how to be a person again instead of a ghost haunting the ruins of a marriage. 3 years of therapy and long runs and throwing myself into work because work was something I could control, something that made sense, something that gave me results when I put in effort. Unlike love, which I'd learned was not a meritocracy, where doing everything right guaranteed you nothing. 3 years of not hearing from her, not a text, not an email, not even the courtesy of divorce papers, which I'd eventually filed myself because apparently even in leaving, she couldn't be bothered to handle the administrative details of ending us. 3 years of building a new life from the wreckage of the old one. And then, last Tuesday, exactly 3 years to the day after she left, though I'm sure the irony was lost on her, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something instinct, curiosity, the universe's sixth sense of humor made me pick up. Hello? Daniel, a voice said. And even though it had been 3 years, even though I'd worked hard to forget the precise timbre and tone of it, I recognized it immediately. Sarah, I need your help, she said. And her voice was different now. Smaller, scared, stripped of the confident certainty she'd had when she'd told me she was leaving. I should have hung up, should have blocked the number, should have protected the peace I'd so carefully constructed over the last 3 years. Instead, I said, "What happened?" And that's when she told me about the accident. The accident happened on Highway 101, northbound, just past the exit for Humboldt Bay, the kind of scenic coastal route that people take for the views, for the romance of it, for the Instagram photos of cliffs meeting ocean under impossibly blue skies. Sarah told me this in fragments, her voice breaking in places where the story became too much to hold together, and I listened with the phone pressed against my ear, standing in my kitchen, a different kitchen now, in a different apartment, in a life I'd built specifically to have nothing in common with the one she'd left behind. We were coming back from wine country, she said, and there was a quality to her voice that I'd never heard before. Not in all our years together, something brittle and fractured, like glass that had already shattered but hadn't fallen apart yet, held together only by the thin film of surface tension. Marcus was driving. It was raining. Marcus was driving. Even now, even in the midst of whatever tragedy she was calling to tell me about, his name still came first. Marcus, the man she'd chosen over me. Marcus, who had been so important, so essential, so worth destroying a marriage for. I didn't say this. I just waited. A truck, she continued, and I could hear her swallowing, could picture her, somewhere, hospital room, police station, some sterile space where bad news gets delivered and lives get recontextualized into before and after, trying to find the words for something that words weren't built to hold. It crossed the center line. The driver fell asleep. They said he fell asleep, and he drifted into our lane. And Marcus tried to swerve, but the road was wet, and Her voice disappeared into something that might have been a sob, or might have been the sound a person makes when they're trying not to make any sound at all. Sarah, I said, And my voice was surprisingly gentle, surprisingly kind, which surprised me because I'd spent 3 years imagining what I might say if she ever called. And none of those imagined conversations involved gentleness. They involved anger. They involved me telling her exactly what her betrayal had cost me, exactly how many nights I'd spent staring at the ceiling wondering what was wrong with me, what deficiency in my character or my body or my soul had made me so easy to discard. But trauma has a way of stripping away pretense. I could hear it in her voice, real fear, real pain, and whatever else she'd done to me. I wasn't the kind of person who could hear someone drowning and refuse to at least acknowledge their suffering. "He's dead, Daniel," she whispered, and the words came out like a confession, like an admission of guilt for some cosmic crime. "Marcus is dead. He died on impact." They said he wouldn't have felt anything, that it was instantaneous. But I don't know if that's true or if that's just something they tell people so they can sleep at night. The rational part of my brain, the part that had gone to therapy, that had worked through the anger and the betrayal and the grief, recognized that I should feel something about this. Sympathy, maybe. Sadness for a life cut short. That basic human response to death that transcends personal history. I felt nothing. Not pleasure at his death. I'm not a monster, but not sadness either. Just a vast, echoing emptiness where emotion should have been, like I was hearing about a stranger, about someone whose existence had never intersected with mine in any meaningful way. Except he had intersected with my life, massively, catastrophically. He was the reason my marriage ended. He was the reason I'd spent a year unable to sleep without medication, unable to trust, unable to imagine that love was anything other than a temporary delusion that people indulged in until something better came along. "I'm sorry," I said, because it seemed like the thing to say, the expected human response to news of death. "I'm in the hospital," she said, pushing forward like she hadn't heard me, or like my condolences were irrelevant to whatever script she was following. I have injuries. Serious injuries. My spine," they said, something about my spine, "and my legs, and I can't feel my legs." The words hung there in the space between us, transmitted through satellites and cell towers, carrying weight that physics couldn't measure. Paralysis. She was calling to tell me she was paralyzed. "They're saying it might be permanent," she continued, and now the tears were unmistakable, thick in her voice, distorting her words. "They're saying I'll need care, that I'll need help, that I can't live alone, I can't work, I can't." She stopped, took a shuddering breath. "I don't have anyone else," she said, and these words came out quieter, smaller, like she was ashamed of them. "My parents are dead. You know that." Marcus was all I had, and now he's gone, and I'm alone, and I'm scared, Daniel. I'm so scared, and I didn't know who else to call. The audacity of it hit me like a physical blow. She didn't know who else to call. After 3 years of silence, after leaving me at a dinner table with cold pasta and a broken heart, after choosing someone else, after building a whole life with someone else, after making it abundantly clear that I was replaceable, forgettable, worth less than a college boyfriend she'd reconnected with on Facebook now, suddenly, I was who she called. Not because she missed me, not because she realized she'd made a mistake, not because she'd spent the last 3 years regretting her choice, but because Marcus was dead, and she needed something from me. "What do you want, Sarah?" I asked, and I kept my voice neutral, careful, the way you might speak to someone standing on a ledge, not because you're particularly invested in whether they jump, but because the situation demands a certain delicacy. "I need help," she said simply. They're releasing me in a few days, and I need somewhere to go, and I need someone to take care of me, at least until I can figure out what happens next. And I thought maybe you." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. She wanted me to take her in, to take care of her, to become her caretaker, her nurse, her solution to the problem of her suddenly demolished life. The same woman who had packed her bags while I was at work, the same woman who had looked me in the eye and told me she was choosing someone else. The same woman who hadn't bothered to contact me once in 3 years, Not even to finalize the divorce paperwork that I'd had to file myself. That woman wanted me to drop everything and rescue her. I could picture it so clearly, Sarah showing up at my door, wheelchair-bound, helpless, expecting me to fold her back into my life like the last 3 years hadn't happened, like she hadn't carved a hole in my chest and walked away without looking back. I could see the expectation in her eyes, the presumption that, of course, I would help, because that's what Daniel does. Daniel is kind. Daniel is reliable. Daniel is the safe choice, the backup plan. The man you return to when the exciting option dies, in a car crash on Highway 101. Daniel, she said, when I didn't respond immediately. Are you still there? I'm here, I said. Will you help me? She asked, and her voice was so small, so broken, so completely unlike the confident woman who had left me, that for a moment, just a moment, I felt something crack in my chest, some old instinct to protect, to save, to be the hero in someone else's story. Then I remembered. I remembered sitting alone at that dinner table. I remembered the sound of her car trunk slamming. I remembered the divorce papers I'd filed by myself, sitting in a lawyer's office while a stranger with kind eyes explained the difference between irreconcilable differences and abandonment. I remembered the first time I went on a date after she left, how I'd had a panic attack in the restaurant bathroom because trusting someone enough to share a meal felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I remembered all of it. No, I said. The word came out clean and simple. No hesitation, no second guessing, just a single syllable that contained 3 years of hard-won self-respect. The silence that followed was profound. What? She said finally, like she couldn't have possibly heard me correctly, like the idea that I might refuse her was so incomprehensible that her brain simply couldn't process it. No, I repeated, and this time I let myself feel the satisfaction of it, the way the word felt in my mouth, solid, final, mine. I'm not going to help you. But Daniel, I need you. I don't have anyone else. That's not my problem, I said. And I said it the way she'd said, I'm leaving 3 years ago. Matter of fact, decided, like we were discussing something that had already been settled in rooms she wasn't invited into. How can you, after everything we had together, how can you just, after everything we had? I interrupted, and now there was something sharp in my voice, something that had been waiting 3 years to cut. You mean the marriage you walked away from? The vows you broke? The life you dismantled while I was at work so you wouldn't have to see my face when you destroyed everything we'd built? I made a mistake, she said, and now she was crying openly, no longer trying to hide it. I know I made a mistake. I should never have left you. I should never have. Marcus was a mistake. And I've regretted it every single day, and I wanted to call you. I wanted to reach out, but I was too ashamed. And now I'm broken, Daniel. I'm literally broken. And I need you, and you're just going to what? You're just going to let me suffer? Let me end up in some state facility because I don't have anyone? You had someone, I said quietly. You had me. You had a husband who loved you, who would have done anything for you, who was planning a future with you, and you chose to leave. You chose Marcus. You chose a different life, and now you're living in the consequences of that choice. That's cruel, she sobbed. That's so cruel. I'm paralyzed. I might never walk again. And you're punishing me for a choice I made 3 years ago? I'm not punishing you, I said, and I meant it. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about making her pay. This was about something much simpler, much more fundamental. I'm just not saving you. There's a difference. Please, she begged, and the desperation in her voice was raw, animal, the sound of someone who has finally realized that the safety net they thought they had doesn't exist. Please, Daniel, I'm begging you. I don't have anyone else. My parents are dead. I don't have siblings. My friends, they have their own lives, their own families. I can't ask them to give up everything to take care of me. But we were married. We took vows. Doesn't that mean anything to you? The laugh that came out of me was bitter, caustic, like acid burning through old wounds. Vows, I said. You want to talk to me about vows? Till death do us part, right? In sickness and in health? For better or for worse, those vows? Yes, she said desperately. Yes, those vows. You broke them, I said simply. You broke them the first time you kissed him. You broke them every time you lied to me about where you were. You broke them when you packed your bags and walked out. You don't get to invoke vows you already shattered when it's convenient for you. When you need something from the person you discarded. I was wrong, she cried. I was so wrong, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I could take it back, I would. If I could undo everything, I would choose you. I would choose us. But I can't, Daniel. I can't change the past. I can only ask you to forgive me, to help me now, when I need it most. And there it was, the play she was making. Contrition and apology, tears and desperate need, an appeal to whatever goodness she thought still existed in me, whatever soft spot she imagined she could still access. 3 years ago, it might have worked. 3 years ago, I was still the man who made her favorite pasta and lit candles for Tuesday dinners, and believed that love was about sacrifice and showing up and being there for people when they needed you. But I wasn't that man anymore. That man died at a dinner table, killed by casual betrayal and the sound of a car trunk closing. I have forgiven you, I said, and I realized as I said it that it was true. I had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for mine. Because carrying anger around like a stone in your chest is exhausting, and at some point you have to set it down or it will crush you. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean I owe you anything. It just means I'm not letting what you did poison the rest of my life. So that's it? She said, and her voice had changed again, hardening around the edges, the tears still there but now mixed with something else, anger maybe, or disbelief. You're really going to let me what? Suffer alone? End up in some nightmare facility where they warehouse people like me? You have options, I said. There are programs, social services, support systems for people in your situation. You're not going to end up homeless or abandoned. You're just not going to end up with me. I can't believe this, she said, and now the anger was fully present, burning through the fear and desperation like a fever. I can't believe you're being this cold, this heartless. What happened to you, Daniel? When did you become this person? The question hung there, and I could feel something in me shift, some final piece clicking into place. You happened to me, I said quietly. You taught me what I was worth to someone who claimed to love me. You taught me that being kind and trusting and open doesn't protect you from betrayal. You taught me that sometimes the people you love will use your goodness against you, will take everything you offer and then walk away when something shinier catches their eye. You happened to me, Sarah, and I learned. She didn't say anything. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, ragged and wet with tears. I wish you well, I said, and I meant that too. I genuinely hope you find the help you need. I hope you heal as much as you can. I hope you build a good life, whatever that looks like now. But I'm not going to be part of it. Not as your caretaker, not as your friend, not as anything. Daniel. Goodbye, Sarah, I said. And I hung up. I stood there in my kitchen for a long time after, phone still in my hand, staring at nothing. Outside, the city moved along in its regular rhythm, cars passing, people walking dogs, the world continuing its indifferent spin. My hands were shaking, not from anger, not from sadness, from something else entirely, a feeling I couldn't quite name, something that felt like grief and relief and fear all mixed together. I had said no. I had actually said no. And the world hadn't ended. I made coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, a small table, nothing like the one from the old house, the one where she'd told me she was leaving. I pulled out my laptop and opened my email, thinking I'd distract myself with work, with the comfortable numbness of spreadsheets and reports. Instead, I found myself opening a browser and typing her name into the search bar, adding accident and Highway 101. The article was easy to find. Local news, 3 days old. Fatal crash. On Highway 101. Leaves one dead, one critically injured. There was a photo of the wreckage, twisted metal, emergency vehicles. That particular kind of destruction that makes you understand how fragile bodies are, how quickly everything can change. Marcus Reeves, 34, pronounced dead at the scene. Sarah Morrison, 33, airlifted to Regional Medical Center with life-threatening injuries. Morrison, not Chen. She'd never even taken my name. I closed the laptop, poured my coffee down the sink, and tried very hard not to think about the fact that somewhere in a hospital room, the woman I'd once loved more than anything was lying in a bed she couldn't leave, facing a future she couldn't walk into, with no one coming to save her. Not even me. Especially not me. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching the headlights from passing cars create moving shadows across the plaster, and I thought about consequences. Not the kind that appear immediately, the sharp, obvious ones like car crashes or broken bones, but the slower kind, the ones that accumulate over time like sediment at the bottom of a river, building up layer by layer until one day you look down and realize you're standing on entirely different ground than where you started. Sarah had consequences now. Immediate, brutal, life-altering consequences. A severed spine, paralyzed legs, a dead boyfriend. A future that looked nothing like what she'd imagined when she drove away from our house 3 years ago, her car packed with her belongings and her heart full of whatever promises Marcus had made her, and I had said no to helping her with those consequences. The thought should have brought relief, maybe even satisfaction. Instead, it brought questions. Was I cruel? Had I become the kind of person who could hear someone suffering and feel nothing? Was this growth? Or had I just replaced one kind of brokenness with another, traded vulnerability for callousness, openness for walls so high nothing could scale them? I turned over, punched my pillow, tried to find a position that felt comfortable, even though I knew the discomfort wasn't physical. My phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark, silent. Part of me expected it to ring again. Expected Sarah to call back, to try a different approach, to find the right combination of words that would unlock whatever goodness she believed still existed in me. It didn't ring. By 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely. I got up, made coffee, stood at my kitchen window watching the city exist in that strange liminal space between night and morning, too late for it to be yesterday, too early to call it today. If you've ever made a decision that goes against everything you were raised to believe about yourself, you know this feeling. You know, the particular vertigo of stepping outside your own character, of doing something that makes you question whether you're the protagonist or the villain in your own story. I was raised to help people. My parents, good people, kind people, the sort who stopped to help strangers with flat tires and donated to every charity that knocked on their door. They taught me that being a good person meant showing up, meant helping when you could, meant putting others' needs before your own comfort. And I had tried to be that person. For years, I had tried. I'd been that person when Sarah said she needed space to find herself 6 months before she left, and I'd given her that space even though it meant sleeping alone more nights than not. I'd been that person when she said she wanted to reconnect with old friends, and I'd encouraged it even though those old friends included Marcus. I'd been that person through every moment of our marriage, believing that being good, being kind, being selfless would somehow insulate us from the kind of tragedy that happened to other people's relationships. It hadn't. Kindness hadn't saved us. Selflessness hadn't made her stay. All my careful goodness had done was make me an easier mark, a softer target, someone whose nature could be exploited because he'd been trained since childhood to believe that helping others was the highest virtue. The coffee tasted bitter. I drank it anyway. At 7 a.m., my phone finally rang. Not Sarah this time. The caller ID said Mom. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering, already knowing how this conversation would go, already bracing for it. Hi, Mom, I said. Daniel, she said, and her voice had that particular quality that mothers develop, the one that can convey disappointment and concern and love all in a single word. Sarah called me. Of course she had. Of course, Sarah had reached out to my mother, had found the one person who might still have leverage over me, who might still be able to appeal to my sense of duty or guilt or whatever remnant of obligation she thought still connected us. Did she? I said, keeping my voice neutral. She told me about the accident, Mom continued. About Marcus. About her injuries. She said she called you for help, and you refused her, Daniel. You hung up on her. I took a breath. Let it out slowly. That's correct, I said. Silence. The particular quality of silence that meant my mother was trying to find the right words, was weighing how to approach this conversation without pushing me away entirely, while still expressing her clear disapproval. Daniel, she said finally, I know she hurt you. I know what she did was terrible, unforgivable even. But she's alone. She's paralyzed. She needs help, and she has options, I interrupted, using the same words I'd used with Sarah. There are programs, support systems. She's not going to die alone in a gutter. She's just not going to be my responsibility. She was your wife, Mom said. And there was steel in her voice now. The voice she'd used when I was a child, and had done something she considered morally wrong. You made promises to her, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. She broke those promises first, I said. She broke them when she left me for another man. You don't get to hold me to vows that she already violated. This isn't about vows, Mom said. This is about being a decent human being. This is about doing the right thing when someone needs help, regardless of your history with them. The right thing, I repeated, and I could hear the bitterness in my own voice. Tell me, Mom, what's the right thing here? Should I drop everything and become her caretaker? Should I give up my job, my apartment, my life, to take care of a woman who made it abundantly clear 3 years ago that I wasn't worth staying for? Should I sacrifice everything I've rebuilt so she doesn't have to face the consequences of her choices? It's not about sacrifice, Mom said. It's about compassion. It's about recognizing that she's in crisis, and you have the ability to help. Having the ability to help doesn't create an obligation to help, I said. I have the ability to help a lot of people. Every homeless person I pass on the street, every charity that sends me a letter, every GoFundMe that crosses my social media feed. I could liquidate everything I own and spend my life helping people. But I don't, because having resources doesn't mean I'm required to distribute them to everyone who asks. This isn't some stranger on the street, Mom said, her voice rising slightly. This is Sarah. This is someone you loved. Someone you shared your life with. Someone who left, I said quietly. Someone who chose someone else. Someone who didn't contact me once in 3 years. Not to apologize, not to explain, not even to finalize our divorce. She only called because Marcus is dead and she needs something from me. That's not a relationship, Mom. That's just opportunism. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Could picture her in her kitchen, the same kitchen I'd grown up in. Sitting at the same table where she'd taught me to tie my shoes and do my homework and believe that being good meant helping others. I raised you better than this, she said finally. And those words hit harder than any argument she could have made, harder than any appeal to duty or morality. Because she was right. She had raised me to be kind, to be helpful, to show up for people who needed me. She'd also raised me to believe that love was enough, that if you were good enough, kind enough, devoted enough, people would choose you, would stay. She'd been wrong about that. You raised me to be a good person, I said, and I'm trying to be one. But being good doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean letting people use me because they know I'll feel guilty if I say no. Sarah made her choice 3 years ago. She chose a different life, a different partner, a different future. And now she's living in the reality of that choice. I'm not being cruel. I'm just not being her solution. Daniel, I have to go, Mom, I said. I have work. We're not done talking about this, she said. Yes, we are, I said gently. I love you, but this isn't your decision to make. It's mine, and I've made it. I hung up before she could respond. The apartment Felt very quiet after that. I showered, got dressed, made breakfast that I didn't eat. Went through all the motions of a normal morning while my phone sat on the counter like a bomb waiting to detonate. It rang again at 9, then at 10:30, then just after noon. Different numbers. Mutual friends, I assumed. People Sarah had contacted, people who'd heard her version of the story. Poor Sarah, paralyzed and alone, abandoned by her cruel ex-husband who wouldn't help in her hour of need. I didn't answer any of them. By 2 p.m., the texts started coming. Jessica, Sarah's college roommate, someone I'd met exactly twice. Hey Daniel, I heard about Sarah. I can't believe you're refusing to help her. She needs you. How can you be so heartless? Mike, mutual friend from couples game nights we used to host. Man, I get that you're hurt, but this is bigger than your feelings. She's paralyzed. Paralyzed. You need to step up. Rachel. Sarah's. My family is disgusted by your behavior. Sarah made a mistake, but this is cruel. You're punishing a paralyzed woman for something that happened years ago. What kind of person does that? The messages kept coming, each one a variation on the same theme. I was heartless. I was cruel. I was punishing Sarah. I was the villain in this story. None of them asked for my side. None of them acknowledged that Sarah had left me, had chosen someone else, had spent 3 years living a completely separate life. None of them seemed to think it was remotely strange that she'd only called me when Marcus was dead and she needed a caretaker. They just saw a paralyzed woman and a man refusing to help her. The story was simple from their perspective. Clear. A binary choice between compassion and cruelty. I was choosing cruelty. I put my phone on silent, closed the blinds, sat in the dimness of my apartment and tried to remember who I was before all of this, before Sarah, before the betrayal, before I became the kind of person who could say no to someone in crisis and mean it. The truth is, I couldn't remember that person. He was too far away, separated from me by too many years and too many scars. All I had was who I was, now someone who'd learned the hard way that you can't save everyone, that sometimes helping someone else means destroying yourself, that there's a difference between compassion and self-immolation. By evening, the texts had evolved into something more aggressive. Unknown number. You're going to regret this. Karma is real. What goes around comes around, and one day you'll need help and no one will be there for you. Unknown number. I hope you can live with yourself. I hope you can sleep at night knowing you left a paralyzed woman to suffer. You're disgusting. Unknown number. You're not the man I thought you were. Sarah dodged a bullet when she left you. You're cold and selfish, and I hope you die alone. I read them all, each one. Let the words sink in. Let them find whatever soft spots still existed in my armor. And then I deleted them, all of them. Because here's what I'd learned in 3 years of rebuilding myself from the wreckage Sarah left behind. Other people's opinions of you are not your responsibility to manage. You cannot control how your story gets told by people who weren't there, who don't know the details, who see only the surface and assume they understand the depths. They could think I was heartless. They could call me cruel. They could write me off as the villain. I knew the truth. I knew that I'd been a good husband. I knew that I'd loved Sarah with everything I had. I knew that I'd done nothing to deserve being left, nothing to warrant the betrayal, nothing to earn the 3 years of silence that followed. And I knew that saying no to her now didn't make me a bad person. It made me a person who had learned, finally, painfully, that you teach people how to treat you by what you're willing to accept. I'd accepted enough. I ordered takeout, ate it while watching a show I'd seen before, something mindless and comfortable that required no emotional investment. Tried very hard not to think about Sarah in a hospital bed somewhere, alone, maybe crying, maybe angry, maybe already calling someone else, trying to find another savior. At midnight, one final text came through. I never knew you could be this cold. The Daniel I married would never have done this. I guess I didn't know you at all. I stared at those words for a long time. The Daniel she married. She was right. The Daniel she'd married would have dropped everything, would have shown up at that hospital with flowers and apologies and promises to make everything okay, would have taken her in without question, would have rebuilt his life around her needs, would have sacrificed everything because that's what love meant to him. Then sacrifice selflessness, putting her first, always. That Daniel was dead. She'd killed him, actually. Killed him when she chose Marcus, when she packed her bags, when she walked away without looking back. I was someone else now, someone harder. Someone who knew that love without reciprocity is just servitude. Someone who understood that being kind to others starts with being kind to yourself, with protecting your own peace, with refusing to light yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. I typed out a response. You're right. You didn't know me, but I didn't know you either. We're strangers now, and strangers don't owe each other their lives. I hope you find the help you need. I hope you heal. But that help won't come from me. Goodbye, Sarah. I hit send, then I blocked her number. Blocked all the unknown numbers that had sent me hateful messages. Blocked the mutual friends who'd chosen to judge me without asking questions. And then I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I pulled out the box from the back of my closet, the one I'd packed when I moved out of our house, the one filled with photos and cards and small mementos from our life together. Our wedding album, the love letters she'd written me when we were dating, the ticket stubs from movies and concerts and trips. I carried it all to the kitchen, set it on the counter, and then, piece by piece, I fed it into my paper shredder. The photos went first. Our wedding day, Sarah in white, me in my rented tux, both of us young and stupid and convinced that love was enough. Our honeymoon in Santorini, sunsets and wine and promises. Every birthday, every anniversary, every casual snapshot of a life I'd thought would last forever. The shredder consumed them all, turned our history into confetti, into strips of paper that meant nothing, that held no power, that couldn't hurt me anymore. The letters went next. Her handwriting, once so precious, now just ink on paper. Words about forever that had meant nothing. Promises that had the lifespan of mayflies. It took 2 hours to shred it all. When I was done, I bagged it up our entire relationship, reduced to trash, and carried it down to the dumpster in the alley behind my building. It was 3 a.m. The city was quiet. A light rain had started, the kind that's more mist than drops, that settles on your skin like cold breath. I stood there in the rain for a moment, looking at the bag of shredded memories, and I waited to feel something. Regret, sadness, grief. Instead, I felt light. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for years without realizing it, and now, finally, I'd set it down. I went back upstairs, took a hot shower, climbed into bed, and for the first time since Sarah's call, I slept, dreamlessly, peacefully, like a man with nothing left to lose. 3 days passed in relative silence. I say relative because silence, in the modern world, is never truly complete. My phone still buzzed occasionally with notifications, work emails, delivery confirmations, the weather app warning me about rain I could already see through my window. But the barrage of angry messages stopped. The concerned calls from people who barely knew me ceased. Even my mother, who I'd expected to launch a full campaign of maternal guilt, respected my boundaries and stayed quiet. The silence felt like vindication. Like proof that most people's outrage has the lifespan of a news cycle, intense and consuming in the moment, but ultimately shallow, easily redirected to the next crisis, the next scandal, the next opportunity to feel morally superior by condemning someone else's choices. I went back to work on Thursday. My job, senior data analyst at a mid-sized consulting firm, wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I'd earned it through competence and consistency, through showing up even when showing up felt impossible, through learning to compartmentalize my personal disasters into a space that didn't interfere with my professional performance. Daniel, my boss, Catherine, said when I walked into her office for our weekly check-in, "How are you holding up?" Catherine was one of the few people I'd told about the divorce when it happened. Not because we were close, we weren't, but because I needed to explain why my performance had temporarily dipped, why I was coming in with circles under my eyes and leaving early for therapy appointments. She'd been kind then, professional but human, the kind of boss who understood that people have lives outside spreadsheets and quarterly reports. "I'm fine," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. She looked at me with the particular expression of someone trying to decide whether to press or let it go. "I heard Sarah was in an accident," she said carefully. Of course she'd heard, because apparently my life was now public property, a story being passed around through networks of mutual acquaintances, each retelling, probably adding new details, new judgments, new reasons why I was either a villain or a victim depending on who was telling it. She was, I confirmed. "And you're okay?" I considered the question. Was I okay? By what metric? I wasn't falling apart. Wasn't drinking myself unconscious, or calling in sick, or doing any of the things people do when tragedy touches their lives. But I also wasn't unaffected. You don't get a call from your ex-wife asking for help and then just move on like it never happened, even if you refuse to help. "I'm managing," I said. "It's complicated, but I'm handling it." Catherine nodded slowly. "If you need time off, or if you need to adjust your workload." "I don't," I interrupted gently. "Work is actually helpful. It's good to have something concrete to focus on, something with clear problems and clear solutions." She smiled at that understanding in her eyes. "Well, the offer stands. And for what it's worth, I think you're handling this with a lot of grace." Grace. The word felt strange applied to me, to my choices. Grace implied elegance, implied moving through difficulty with dignity and composure. But what I felt wasn't graceful. It was survival. It was the hard-won knowledge that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is refuse to be kind to people who've proven they don't value your kindness. "Thank you," I said. We talked about work, then client deliverables, upcoming presentations, the usual choreography of corporate life. It felt normal, grounding. A reminder that I had a life beyond the drama Sarah had tried to pull me back into. A life I'd built deliberately, carefully, piece by piece, over 3 years. After work, I went to the gym. This was new, the gym habit. The old Daniel, the one married to Sarah, had been perpetually meaning to exercise more, always planning to start next week, next month, after this project finished, after things settled down. There had always been an excuse, always something more important, always Sarah suggesting we order takeout and watch a show instead of me going for a run. The new Daniel had a trainer, Marcus, different Marcus, thank God, because the universe couldn't be that cruel, who met me twice a week and pushed me through workouts that left me shaking and drenched in sweat and feeling more alive than I'd felt in years. "You're distracted today," Marcus the trainer said, as I fumbled through a set of kettlebell swings. "Sorry," I said, resetting my form. "Don't apologize. Just focus. Whatever's in your head, leave it in the locker room. Right now, it's just you and the weight. Just you and the weight." I liked that, liked the simplicity of it, liked that in this space, success was measurable, improvable, entirely within my control. Lift the weight or don't. Run the mile or don't. Show up or don't. No one could leave you while you were doing a deadlift. No one could betray you between sets. The weight didn't care about your history or your feelings, or whether you deserved good things. It just existed, and you either moved it or you didn't. I moved it. By the time I left the gym, muscles aching in that good way that promised I was building something strength, endurance, a body that felt like mine instead of a vessel I inhabited. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been romantic if I'd been the kind of person who still found sunsets romantic instead of just astronomical phenomena. I stopped at the grocery store on the way home. Another new habit, cooking real meals, eating like someone who valued their body, their health, their future. The old Daniel had survived on convenience and compromise, eating whatever Sarah wanted, or whatever was easiest, or whatever didn't require too much thought. The new Daniel meal prepped, made grocery lists, bought vegetables he actually ate instead of letting them rot in the crisper drawer. I was examining avocados, checking for that perfect give that meant they'd be ready tomorrow when I heard someone say my name. Daniel. Daniel Chen. I turned. It took me a moment to place her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, athletic build, kind eyes. Then it clicked. Emma, I said. Hi. Emma Rodriguez. We'd gone to college together, been in the same study group for Statistics 301, had that easy friendship that sometimes develops between people who aren't attracted to each other but genuinely enjoy each other's company. We'd lost touch after graduation, the way people do. Our lives diverging into different cities and different careers and different futures. I thought that was you, she said, smiling. What are you doing in Portland? Last I heard, you were in Seattle. I moved back about 2 years ago, I said. Work opportunity. You? Never left, she said. I'm teaching at PSU now, mathematics department. We fell into the easy rhythm of catching up her dissertation, my job, the ways our lives had unfolded since we'd last seen each other at graduation. Young and optimistic and convinced we'd change the world with our degrees and our ambition. Are you married? She asked. And the question was casual, just part of the standard catching up script. But it still made something tighten in my chest. Divorced, I said, keeping my voice neutral. As of about 2 years ago. You? Single, she said. There was a guy during grad school, but it didn't work out. Turns out he wanted a wife who'd give up her career to follow him around to various postdoc positions, and I wanted to actually use my PhD. So, she shrugged. You know how it goes. I did know. I knew exactly how it went. The way relationships ended when people wanted different things, when the future you'd imagined together turned out to be just your imagination, when you realized you were planning parallel lives instead of a shared one. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be, she said easily. Best thing that ever happened to me. Actually, I love my job. I love my life. And I've discovered that being alone is way better than being with someone who makes you feel like you have to shrink yourself to fit into their vision of who you should be. Something about the way she said it, matter of fact, confident, like she'd wrestled with that truth and come out the other side stronger, made me smile. That's a good philosophy, I said. It's a survival philosophy, she corrected. But yes, it works. She paused, then said, Hey, are you free for coffee sometime? I'd love to catch up properly. Grocery store small talk is great, but I feel like we're about to get judged by the person behind us for blocking the avocados. I glanced back. There was indeed someone waiting, trying to be polite about it but clearly wanting access to the produce we were standing in front of. Sorry, I said, moving aside with my cart. So? Emma prompted. Coffee? And there it was, a simple invitation. The kind extended between old friends, nothing heavy or loaded, just two people who used to know each other wanting to reconnect. The old Daniel would have overthought it, would have worried about sending the wrong signals or getting hurt again, or whether it was too soon after Sarah's call to even think about being social, would have found some polite excuse, some reason to keep his walls up and his distance maintained. The new Daniel said, Yeah, coffee sounds great. We exchanged numbers. Made plans for Saturday morning at a cafe near campus. Said goodbye with the kind of warmth that comes from genuinely looking forward to something. I finished my shopping in a surprisingly good mood. That night, after I'd cooked dinner, chicken breast with roasted vegetables, nothing fancy but nutritious and satisfying, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened my laptop and pulled up the file folder labeled Project Horizon. Project Horizon was my secret. Not a dark secret, not something shameful, just private, personal. The kind of thing you don't talk about until it's real, because talking about dreams before they're ready feels like jinxing them. For the past year, I've been working on an app, a data visualization tool designed specifically for small nonprofits organizations that needed sophisticated analytics but couldn't afford enterprise solutions. I'd been building it slowly, carefully, using my skills from work, but applying them to something that mattered, something that felt like it made a difference. It was almost ready. maybe another month of development, another 2 months of beta testing, and it could launch. I'd been scared to finish it. Scared of what it meant that I had ambitions beyond my job, dreams beyond just surviving, that I was actually building towards something instead of just away from the wreckage of my marriage. But looking at the code tonight, at the clean architecture and the intuitive interface and the real utility of what I'd created, I felt something unfamiliar. Pride. Actual, genuine pride in something I'd built with my own hands, my own mind, my own vision of what the world could use. I worked on it for 3 hours, lost in the flow state that came when the code was cooperating and the problems were solvable and everything else faded into background noise. When I finally closed my laptop, it was after midnight, and I felt more myself than I had in days. This was who I was now, not Sarah's abandoned husband, not the cruel man who'd refused to help his paralyzed ex-wife, just Daniel, a man with a job and a gym habit and a secret project and the phone number of an old friend saved in his contacts. A man with a life. Friday morning brought another text from an unknown number. Unknown. You should know that Sarah tried to kill herself last night. She took pills. They pumped her stomach. She's in psych hold now. This is on you. Her blood is on your hands. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I called the hospital, asked for Sarah Morrison, claimed to be family, waited through holds and transfers, until finally a nurse came on the line. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have any patient by that name in our psychiatric ward," she said. "Can you check admissions from the last 24 hours? A pause. Typing sounds. No, sir. No Sarah Morrison admitted in the last 48 hours. Are you sure you have the right hospital?" I thanked her and hung up. Called 2 more hospitals. Same answer. The text had been a lie. Someone, maybe Sarah herself, maybe one of her friends, had tried to manipulate me with a fake suicide attempt. Had tried to weaponize my compassion by making me believe that refusing to help her had driven her to self-harm. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. The calculation of it, knowing exactly which buttons to push, which fears to exploit, which version of guilt would be most effective. I blocked the number, and then I did something that surprised me. I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not an angry one. Just genuine, disbelieving laughter at the sheer audacity of it, at how far someone was willing to go to try to control me, to make me responsible for their choices, to turn my boundaries into weapons they could use against me. I'd been right to say no. Every message, every guilt trip, every manipulation attempt just proved it. Sarah, or whoever was fighting her battles for her, didn't want help. They wanted control, wanted me to fold, to cave, to prove that I was still the Daniel who could be guilted into sacrificing himself. But that Daniel was gone, and I wasn't bringing him back. Not for fake suicide attempts, not for angry mothers or judgmental friends, not for anyone. Saturday morning, I met Emma at the coffee shop. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. "I remembered you liked lattes," she said as I sat down. "Hope that hasn't changed." "It hasn't," I said, oddly touched that she'd remembered something so small from a decade ago. We talked for 2 hours, about work, about life, about the ways we'd changed, and the ways we'd stayed the same. She told me about her research, something involving topology and knot theory that went over my head, but that she explained with such enthusiasm I couldn't help but smile. I told her about my job, about the app I was building, about how I'd rebuilt my life after my divorce. I didn't tell her about Sarah's call, didn't mention the accident or the requests for help or the manipulation attempts. That story felt too heavy, too raw, too likely to shift the energy from pleasant catching up to something darker and more complicated. Instead, I just enjoyed the conversation, enjoyed being seen as a whole person, not just as someone's ex-husband, or someone's villain, or someone's potential savior. Just Daniel, a guy drinking coffee on a Saturday morning with an old friend who made him laugh. "I'm really glad we ran into each other," Emma said as we were getting ready to leave. "I forgot how easy it is to talk to you." "Same," I said, and meant it. "We should do this again," she said. "Maybe dinner next time. There's this great Thai place near my apartment. And there it was, that moment, where a friendly catch-up could become something more, where casual could become intentional, where the door opened to possibility. I could have said no, could have kept things safely in the friend zone, could have protected myself from the risk of getting close to someone new, could have stayed in my carefully constructed bubble where no one could hurt me because no one was allowed in. But looking at Emma, smart, funny, genuine Emma, who'd built a life she was proud of and who seemed to actually enjoy my company, I realized something. Saying no to Sarah wasn't the same as saying no to everyone. Protecting myself from someone who'd proven they'd hurt me wasn't the same as closing myself off from everyone who might care about me. I could have boundaries and still be open, could refuse to be used and still allow myself to connect. "Dinner sounds great," I said. She smiled, bright and genuine, and something in my chest that had been clenched tight for 3 years loosened just slightly. We said goodbye, made plans for Wednesday, and I walked home through the autumn morning feeling something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten what to call it. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope that things would go back to how they were, but the quiet, steady hope that things could be good again. Different, yes. Changed, absolutely. But good. That I could build a life worth living, not just in spite of what Sarah had done, but because of what I'd learned from it. That the scars could become wisdom instead of wounds. That I could be someone new, someone stronger, someone who knew his own worth and refused to compromise it. Someone who could say no when no was the right answer, and yes when yes felt like possibility instead of risk. I was becoming that person, slowly, painfully, but definitely, and no amount of guilt or manipulation or angry texts could take that away from me. I'd earned it. Every hard decision, every boundary held, every moment of choosing myself over someone else's expectations. I'd earned the right to move forward, and I was taking it. Wednesday came wrapped in that particular quality of autumn rain that Portland does better than anywhere else. Not quite heavy enough to be called a storm, not light enough to ignore. Just persistent and gray and somehow appropriate for the mood I couldn't quite shake. I met Emma at the Thai restaurant she'd suggested, a small place tucked into a corner of Hawthorne that smelled like lemongrass and garlic and something warm I couldn't identify. She was waiting inside, shaking rain from her jacket, and when she saw me, she smiled in a way that made something in my chest do a complicated movement I wasn't ready to name. "I was starting to think you'd stood me up," she said, but her tone was teasing, light, not actually worried. "Traffic," I said, which was true, but also felt inadequate. The real reason I'd almost been late was that I'd spent 20 minutes standing in my apartment, staring at my reflection, wondering if I was ready for this, not dinner with Emma specifically, but the idea of dinner with anyone. The vulnerability of trying again, of letting someone new see the person I'd become. We ordered. She got pad C. Ew. I got green curry. And we shared spring rolls while talking about her research and my app and the ways our lives had unfolded since college. The conversation was easy, natural, the kind that flows without effort when two people genuinely enjoy each other's company. "So tell me about this app," she said, twirling noodles around her fork. "You mentioned it Saturday, but you got all mysterious about the details." I hesitated. Project Horizon had been private for so long, something I guarded carefully, but looking at Emma's genuinely interested expression, I found myself wanting to share it. "It's a data visualization tool for nonprofits," I said. "Most analytics software is either too expensive or too complicated for small organizations to use effectively. I'm building something that's intuitive, affordable, and specifically designed for the kind of reporting nonprofits need: donor tracking, impact measurement, grant compliance, that sort of thing." Her eyes lit up. "Daniel, that's brilliant. Do you know how many organizations need exactly that? The math department does outreach work with community groups, and they're constantly struggling with exactly that problem. They have data, but no good way to analyze or present it." "That's the goal," I said, feeling that flush of pride again. "Make something useful, something that actually helps people do good work, instead of just making tech bros richer." "When do you launch?" "Maybe 2 months? I'm in beta testing now." working out the bugs. It's been... I paused, searching for the right word. It's been good to build something, to create something that didn't exist before. She nodded slowly, and something in her expression suggested she understood what I wasn't saying, that this wasn't just about an app. It was about proving to myself that I could create instead of just survive, that I had value beyond being someone's husband or someone's solution. I'd love to see it sometime, she said. If you're willing to show it off. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. We talked through dinner, then over tea, and before I knew it, 2 hours had passed and the restaurant was starting to close around us. We walked out into the rain together, and Emma pulled her jacket tighter against the cold. I had a really good time, she said, and there was something in her voice, hope, maybe, or possibility, that made me acutely aware of how close we were standing, how easy it would be to close the distance between us, how long it had been since I'd kissed someone. But something held me back. Not fear, exactly. Just awareness. The knowledge that I wasn't quite ready yet, that whatever was growing between us deserved more than me using it as proof that I'd moved on, as evidence that Sarah's betrayal hadn't broken me beyond repair. Me too, I said. We should do this again. We should, she agreed, and if she was disappointed that I didn't kiss her, she didn't show it. She just smiled, squeezed my hand briefly, and headed to her car. I drove home, through the rain, feeling complicated. Good, but complicated. Like I was standing at a threshold I wasn't quite ready to cross, looking at a future that seemed possible but still frightening in its unknowability. When I got home, there was an envelope taped to my door. No address, no return label, just my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Something cold settled in my stomach. I took it inside, set it on my kitchen counter, stared at it for a solid minute before opening it, some instinct warning me that whatever was inside was going to complicate the careful peace I'd been building. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds, and a USB drive. The paper was a printed article from a local news site dated 2 days ago. Paralyzed accident victim launches GoFundMe for medical care. There was a photo, Sarah, in a hospital bed, looking thin and pale and heartbreakingly vulnerable. The kind of photo specifically designed to elicit sympathy, to make you want to reach for your wallet, your resources, your compassion. I read the article with a strange detachment, like I was reading about a stranger. Sarah Morrison, 33, is facing an uncertain future after a tragic accident on Highway 101 left her paralyzed from the waist down and claimed the life of her partner, Marcus Reeves. Morrison, who has no family and limited support system, is seeking help to cover medical expenses, rehabilitation costs, and necessary home modifications as she adjusts to life in a wheelchair. I never imagined my life would change so completely in a single moment, Morrison said from her hospital bed. 1 minute we were driving home, talking about our future, and the next, everything was gone. Marcus is gone. My ability to walk is gone. I'm trying to be strong, but it's terrifying to face this alone. The GoFundMe campaign, titled Help Sarah Walk Again, has a goal of $250,000 to cover immediate medical needs and potential experimental treatments. Morrison's friends have organized the campaign after her ex-husband refused to provide assistance despite their shared history. It's heartbreaking, said Jessica Chen, a close friend of Morrison's and organizer of the fundraiser. She has no one, and the one person who should be there for her has turned his back completely. We're trying to fill that gap, but she needs help from anyone willing to give it. I read it twice, then a third time. The details were technically accurate but framed in a way that made me look like a monster. The cruel ex-husband who'd abandoned his paralyzed former wife in her hour of need, who'd refused to provide assistance as if I had some obligation, some duty that I'd callously ignored. There was no mention of why we'd divorced, no mention of her leaving me for Marcus, no mention that she hadn't contacted me once in 3 years until she needed something. Just the stark, simple narrative, woman paralyzed, ex-husband refuses to help. Isn't that terrible? I set down the article and picked up the USB drive. This was the part that made me nervous. USB drives showed up in stories like this for a reason. They contained evidence, proof, something that would complicate the narrative even further. I plugged it into my laptop. One folder, one video file. I clicked it. The video was grainy, clearly shot on a phone, but the audio was clear. It was dated 3 days ago, the day after Sarah had first called me. The scene was a hospital room. Sarah was in bed, but not alone. Jessica, the close friend, from the article was there, along with 2 other women I didn't recognize. "I can't believe he said no," one of them was saying. "After everything, he just hung up on you?" Sarah's voice. "He's changed. He's not the Daniel I knew. That Daniel would have dropped everything." Well, the new Daniel is clearly an asshole, but that's actually good for us. A pause. Then Sarah, "What do you mean?" Jessica, her voice taking on a calculating tone. "I mean, people love a victim story. Paralyzed woman, abandoned by cruel ex-husband. That's worth at least $250,000 in GoFundMe donations, probably more. We just have to frame it right." Another woman, "Won't he see the campaign? Won't he say something?" Jessica laughing, "Let him. It'll just make him look worse. Any statement he makes will seem defensive, cruel. The more he tries to defend himself, the more heartless he'll appear. It's perfect." "I don't know. Using Daniel like that feels..." Jessica, cutting her off. "Sarah, listen to me. You need money. Real money. For modifications, for care, for everything. Marcus's life insurance won't cover it all. Your savings are gone. This is your best option. And honestly, after what he did to you, don't you think he owes you something?" "What he did to me?" Sarah's voice sounded confused. "You know what I mean. The way he made you feel trapped in that marriage. The way he was always so suffocating. Always trying to please you. Always making you feel guilty for wanting something more. That's emotional manipulation, Sarah. You left because you had to, for your mental health. And now he's punishing you for it by refusing to help when you're literally paralyzed. That's abuse." I felt my jaw clench, felt rage building in my chest, hot and clean and righteous. They were rewriting history, turning my devotion into manipulation, my love into abuse, my boundaries into cruelty. They were constructing a narrative where Sarah was the victim twice over first of my supposed emotional abuse, then of my abandonment, and using that narrative to manipulate strangers into giving her money. The video continued. I guess you're right. He should help. He was my husband. Those vows meant something." "Exactly. And if he won't honor them, the public will hold him accountable. Trust me, this is going to work. People eat this stuff up, especially when there's a clear villain." The video ended. I sat there in the darkness of my apartment, laptop screen glowing, feeling something shift fundamentally inside me. This wasn't just about refusing to help Sarah anymore. This was about my reputation, my name, my truth being weaponized for profit. This was about people who'd never met me deciding I was a monster based on a carefully constructed lie. I could let it go, could ignore the GoFundMe, could block the messages, could move forward with my life and let Sarah and her friends spin whatever story they wanted. But that would mean letting the lie stand, would mean letting strangers believe I was the kind of person who'd abandon a paralyzed woman out of spite, would mean that version of me, the villain in Sarah's story, would exist in the world, unchallenged, accepted as truth. I'd spent 3 years rebuilding myself, 3 years learning my worth, establishing boundaries, becoming someone I was proud of. I wasn't going to let them destroy that with lies. I made a copy of the video, saved it in 3 different locations: my computer, the cloud, an external hard drive. Evidence, proof, the kind of truth that couldn't be disputed or reframed or explained away. Then I did something I probably should have done weeks ago. I called a lawyer, not just any lawyer. Rebecca Morrison, no relation to Sarah, thankfully was a friend from my gym, someone Marcus the trainer had introduced me to 6 months ago when she'd needed help with her nonprofit's data analysis, and I'd volunteered. She specialized in defamation and personal reputation cases, and she'd told me once, after a particularly brutal workout, that if I ever needed legal advice, I should call her. It was 11 p.m. She answered on the third ring. "Daniel, is everything okay?" "I need legal advice," I said, "and I think I need to sue someone." There was a pause. Then, "Come to my office tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Bring everything you have." "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Just get some sleep. This sounds like it's going to be complicated." I hung up and sat in the darkness, thinking about consequences. Sarah had made a choice 3 years ago. She'd chosen Marcus, chosen to leave, chosen to build a life without me in it. And now she was making another choice, to lie about me, to weaponize my reputation, to profit from a false narrative that painted me as an abuser and an abandoner. Every choice has consequences. She'd taught me that 3 years ago when she left. Now, I was going to teach her what consequences looked like when you tried to destroy someone who'd learned to fight back. Not with anger, not with cruelty, with evidence, with truth, with the quiet, methodical application of facts to dismantle lies. I opened my laptop and started writing. A timeline of our relationship, our divorce, the 3 years of silence. Dates, facts, screenshots of the divorce papers I'd filed alone, records of every attempt I'd made to contact her about finalizing our separation that had gone unanswered. I wrote about the phone call, about her request for help, about my refusal and the reasons for it. I wrote the truth, plain and unadorned, the kind of truth that doesn't need embellishment because facts speak louder than fiction. By 3 a.m., I had a 20-page document, complete, thorough, defensible. I titled it, "The Truth About Sarah Morrison," and saved it. Then I finally went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, thinking about the video, about Jessica's calculating voice, about the way they'd turned my love into abuse and my boundaries into cruelty. And I thought about Emma, about dinner, about the possibility of something good, something healthy, something built on honesty instead of manipulation. I thought about the app I was building, the life I'd constructed, the person I'd become, and I realized something fundamental. I wasn't fighting for Sarah's approval anymore. I wasn't fighting to win her back or prove my worth to her or make her see what she'd lost. I was fighting for myself, for my truth, for the right to move forward without carrying her lies on my back. If you've ever been falsely accused, you know this feeling. You know the particular rage that comes from watching people believe lies about you, from seeing your character assassinated by people who don't know you, from being powerless to stop a narrative that's already spreading like wildfire. But I wasn't powerless. I had evidence. I had truth. I had a lawyer who specialized in exactly this kind of fight, and I had something Sarah had underestimated, something she'd forgotten in the 3 years since she'd left. I had become someone who didn't back down, someone who'd learned that kindness didn't mean being weak, that boundaries didn't mean being cruel, that refusing to be used wasn't the same as refusing to care. I'd become someone who understood that the highest form of self-respect is knowing when to walk away and when to stand your ground. And this lie, this manipulation, this attempt to profit from destroying my reputation, this was where I stood my ground. Tomorrow, I would meet with Rebecca, would lay out everything I had, would start the process of defending myself, not with anger or vindictiveness, but with a cold, clear application of truth to lies. Tonight, I just lay in the darkness and felt something I hadn't felt in years settle over me like armor. Certainty. I was doing the right thing. Not the easy thing. Not the thing that would make everyone like me or approve of me or think I was a good person. But the right thing for me. For my future. For the life I was building. And that was enough. It had to be. Because I'd learned the hard way that you can't control what other people think of you. Can't force them to see your truth. Can't make them understand your choices. You can only decide what you're willing to accept, what you're willing to fight for, and who you're willing to be when the world is watching. I'd made my decision. Now, I just had to see it through. Outside, The rain continued its steady percussion against my windows, washing the city clean, making everything sharp and clear and new. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and legal strategies, and the beginning of a fight I'd never wanted but would no longer avoid. Tonight, I just let myself feel ready. Ready to fight, ready to defend, ready to prove that truth, wielded carefully and backed by evidence, is stronger than any lie. Even the ones told by people you used to love, especially those. Rebecca Morrison's office was located in a renovated warehouse in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and industrial windows that let in the kind of gray morning light that made everything look like it existed in a noir film. I arrived at 8:45, clutching a folder containing printouts of everything: the video, the GoFundMe article, my timeline, screenshots of the harassment messages, divorce papers, every scrap of evidence that proved my side of the story. The receptionist, a young man with asymmetrical hair and kind eyes, smiled when I walked in.
Daniel Chen? Rebecca's expecting you. Can I get you coffee or water?
Coffee, I said. Black. He disappeared and returned moments later with a ceramic mug that had, nevertheless, "She persisted," printed on it in bold letters. I appreciated the irony here. I was a man trying to persist against a narrative designed to destroy him, drinking from a mug celebrating women's perseverance. "She'll be right with you," he said, gesturing to a seating area with leather chairs and a glass coffee table covered in legal magazines. I had no interest in reading. I sat, drank the coffee, watched the rain trace patterns down the windows, and tried not to think about how I'd ended up here in a lawyer's office, preparing to defend myself against lies told by the woman I'd once promised to love forever. Daniel. Rebecca emerged from a hallway, dressed in sharp black pants and a burgundy blouse that somehow managed to look both professional and intimidating. She was in her early 40s, with salt and pepper hair cut in a precise bob, and the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without realizing you were doing it. "Thank you for seeing me so quickly," I said, standing. "Of course. Come on back." Her office was exactly what I'd expected: organized chaos, law books everywhere, a massive desk covered in files and legal pads, and a laptop surrounded by post-it notes in various colors. She gestured to a chair across from her desk and settled into her own with the ease of someone completely comfortable in their domain. "So," she said, folding her hands on the desk, "tell me everything." I did. I started with Sarah leaving 3 years ago, giving Rebecca the bare facts without emotional embellishment. The dinner, the announcement, the silence that followed, then the accident, the phone call, my refusal to help, the escalating harassment, the fake suicide attempt text, and finally, the GoFundMe campaign and the video. Rebecca listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad, but mostly just maintaining steady eye contact that made me feel simultaneously exposed and protected. When I finished, I pushed the folder across her desk. "It's all in there. Everything I could think of that might be relevant." She opened it, began methodically working through the contents. I watched her face for reactions, for some indication of what she was thinking, but she maintained perfect professional neutrality. After 10 minutes of silence, broken only by the sound of pages turning and rain against windows, she looked up. "This video," she said. "How did you get it?" "Someone left it at my door, in an envelope with the article. No return address, no indication of who sent it. Any idea who?" I shook my head. "No, but whoever it was wanted me to have evidence, wanted me to know what they were saying about me when I wasn't there to defend myself." Rebecca leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled under her chin. Could be a friend who got cold feet about the campaign. Could be someone with a conscience. Could even be someone who wants to see this blow up into a bigger mess. Doesn't matter for our purposes, the video is authentic. Clearly shows them planning to defraud donors by misrepresenting the facts, and gives us significant ammunition. "So, we can use it?" "We can use it," she confirmed. "But Daniel, before we get into strategy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." I nodded. "Is there anything in your history with Sarah that she could use against you? Anything that, if it came out during litigation, would make you look bad? Any fights that got physical? Any threatening messages? Any behavior that could be twisted to support her narrative that you were emotionally manipulative or abusive? The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of self-examination through my memory. No, I said. Never. I never raised a hand to her, never threatened her, never. I paused, searching for the right words. The worst thing I ever did in our marriage was love her too much, was try too hard to make her happy, was ignore warning signs because I wanted to believe we were solid. But abusive? Manipulative? No, never. What about after she left? Any angry emails, texts, voicemails? I thought about those first few weeks after she'd left, the nights when the pain was so acute I could barely breathe, when I'd wanted to call her and scream, or beg, or demand explanations. I called her 3 times in the first month, I said. Left voicemails asking her to talk to me, to explain what I'd done wrong, to at least give me closure. She never called back. After that, nothing until I filed the divorce papers. I sent her a certified letter informing her of the filing, which she ignored. That's it. No harassment, no threats, just silence. Rebecca nodded slowly. Good. That's good. Because in cases like this, your character is going to be examined, dissected, pulled apart. If there were skeletons, we'd need to know about them now. There aren't any, I said firmly. Okay. She pulled out a fresh legal pad. Let's talk about your options. First, the defamation angle. The GoFundMe campaign and the news article both contain statements that are demonstrably false, specifically the implication that you had some obligation to provide care and that your refusal constitutes abandonment or cruelty. The video proves they knowingly misrepresented the situation for financial gain. Can we take down the GoFundMe? We can try. We can send a cease and desist letter to the platform, provide evidence that the campaign is based on fraudulent claims. They might take it down voluntarily to avoid liability. If they don't, we can sue both Sarah and Jessica, the campaign organizer, for defamation and fraud. What about the people who already donated? Do they get their money back? Rebecca's expression hardened slightly. That's where it gets complicated. Once the money's distributed, getting it back is difficult. Sarah could claim she used it for legitimate medical expenses. We'd have to prove she obtained it through intentionally false statements, which we can, but the practical reality of recovering funds already spent is challenging. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. So she might get away with it? With lying about me and profiting from it? She might get away with keeping some of the money, Rebecca said carefully, but getting away with it and facing no consequences are different things. We can make her life very legally complicated. We can create a public record of her fraud. We can ensure that anyone who searches her name finds the truth alongside her lies. That's worth something. What about the harassment, the fake suicide text? Harder to prove who sent that unless we can trace the number, but it's part of the pattern of harassment you've experienced, which strengthens your case for intentional infliction of emotional distress. She paused, studying my face. Daniel, I need to be clear about what you're getting into if we pursue this. Litigation is expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. You'll have to relive your divorce, your pain, your private life in public documents. Sarah will fight back, she'll have to protect her fundraising. She'll probably double down on the abuse narrative, try to paint you as a vindictive ex using your resources to punish a disabled woman. The court of public opinion doesn't always care about evidence. You could win the legal battle and still lose in terms of your reputation. So what do you recommend? Why? Rebecca was quiet for a moment, tapping her pen against the legal pad. Honestly, if this were just about the money, or even just about your reputation in some abstract sense, I'd tell you to walk away. Let her have her GoFundMe, block everyone harassing you, and move on with your life. But this isn't abstract. She's actively defaming you. She's profiting from lies. And based on this video, she and her friends are doing it deliberately, calculatedly, with full knowledge that they're misrepresenting the truth. She leaned forward. So if you want to fight, we fight. We start with a cease and desist letter to Sarah, Jessica, and GoFundMe. We demand immediate takedown of the campaign and a public retraction of false statements. We give them 72 hours to comply. If they don't, we file suit for defamation, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We release the video as evidence. We make the truth public in a way that can't be ignored or reframed. And if they do comply, if they take down the campaign and issue a retraction, then you've won without going to court. They've admitted fault, even if not explicitly. The campaign dies, the lies are retracted, and you move on. I thought about Emma, about my app, about the life I'd been building, about whether I wanted to spend the next year in legal battles, in depositions, in the public eye, fighting a woman everyone would see as a victim and me as a bully. Then I thought about the video, about Jessica's calculating voice, about the way they'd turned my marriage into a weapon, my boundaries into evidence of cruelty, my love into something twisted and wrong. I thought about every person who'd read that article and decided I was a monster without knowing my side, about every dollar donated based on lies, about the precedent it set that you could destroy someone's reputation, profit from false narratives, and face no consequences as long as you positioned yourself as the victim. Let's fight, I said. Rebecca smiled. Not happily, this wasn't the kind of thing you smiled happily about, but with the grim satisfaction of someone who enjoyed a righteous battle. Okay then, let's fight. She spent the next hour walking me through the process, what to expect, what documents we'd need. She explained that she'd draft the cease and desist letter today, send it via email and certified mail, and we'd wait for their response. In the meantime, she said, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Document everything. Every message you receive, every interaction related to this case, every time someone approaches you about Sarah or the GoFundMe. Screenshots, dates, times, contexts. Build a record. And Daniel, she fixed me with a serious look. Do not, under any circumstances, respond to harassment. Do not post about this on social media. Do not talk to reporters if any contact you. Let me handle all communication. The moment you start defending yourself publicly, you give them ammunition. Silence and evidence. That's our strategy. I nodded. Understood. Good. She stood, extending her hand. I'll have the letter drafted by end of day. You'll see it before I send it. We'll go from there. I shook her hand, feeling the solid certainty of her grip, the confidence of someone who knew exactly how to navigate the terrain we were entering. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet, she said, echoing what she'd told me on the phone. We're just getting started. I left her office feeling strange, not relieved exactly, but purposeful. Like I'd been drifting and had suddenly found direction. Had gone from being reactive to being proactive. From defending to attacking. The rain had stopped. The city looked washed clean, sharp-edged. The kind of clarity that comes after storms. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Hey, how's your day going? Still on for coffee tomorrow? I stared at the message, at the normalcy of it, at the reminder that I had a life beyond this legal battle, beyond Sarah and her lies and the fight I was about to wage. Day's been interesting. Definitely still on for tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Me too. See you then. I pocketed my phone and started walking. Not to my car. I'd taken an Uber, knowing I'd be too distracted to drive safely. But just walking, needing to move, to process, to let the morning's revelations settle into something I could carry. I found myself at the waterfront, watching the Willamette River flow past, dark and steady and indifferent to human drama. A jogger passed, a woman walking 3 dogs, a homeless man asking for change, which I gave him without thinking. Automatic kindness that cost me nothing but apparently meant something to him based on his grateful smile. Life continued. The world kept turning. And I was just one person in it, fighting one battle, trying to protect one reputation. But it was my battle, my reputation, my life. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me without a fight. My phone buzzed again. This time, an email notification from Rebecca. Subject line, Draft cease and desist. Your review requested. I opened it standing there by the river. reading legal language that somehow made my pain sound official, legitimate, worthy of defense. Dear Miss Morrison and Miss Chen, I represent Daniel Chen regarding defamatory statements made in connection with a GoFundMe campaign titled Help Sarah Walk Again and subsequent media coverage. My client has been falsely portrayed as having abandoned his ex-wife in a time of medical crisis, with deliberate omission of relevant facts regarding the dissolution of their marriage and the complete absence of contact for 3 years prior to Miss Morrison's recent request for assistance. We have obtained evidence, including video documentation, demonstrating that these false statements were made knowingly and with intent to defraud donors and damage my client's reputation. Specifically, it went on, precise, damning, backed by facts and evidence, and the kind of legal authority that made it clear this wasn't a request, it was a warning shot. The letter gave them 72 hours to immediately cease all fundraising activities, issue a public retraction and apology, return all funds obtained through false pretenses, provide written assurance of no further defamatory statements. Failure to comply would result in legal action seeking damages for defamation, fraud, and emotional distress, plus attorney's fees and costs. I read it twice, feeling something that might have been satisfaction or might have been dread. It was hard to tell the difference sometimes. At the bottom, Rebecca had added a note. Daniel, let me know if you want any changes. Otherwise, I'll send this today at 5 p.m., giving them the weekend to panic and consult lawyers. Based on the video evidence, I suspect they'll fold. If they don't, we're ready for the next step. I replied simply, send it. Then I stood there watching the river, thinking about consequences and choices and the way every decision creates ripples that extend far beyond the initial moment. Sarah had chosen to leave me 3 years ago. That choice had created ripples, divorce, loneliness, transformation, growth. I'd learned from those ripples, had let them reshape me into someone stronger. Now she'd made another choice to lie about me, to profit from those lies, to destroy my reputation for financial gain. That choice would have ripples too. Legal ripples, public ripples. The kind that couldn't be controlled or contained once they started spreading. She'd probably thought I would just take it, would let her frame whatever narrative she wanted, because confronting her would make me look cruel, would make me, the man who sued a paralyzed woman, would confirm everything she was saying about my heartlessness. She'd underestimated me. Or maybe she'd just forgotten who I'd become in the 3 years since she'd known me. The old Daniel, her Daniel, would have taken it, would have let the lies stand because defending himself felt too aggressive, too mean, too much like becoming the villain she'd already painted him as. But I wasn't that Daniel anymore. I was someone who understood that defending yourself isn't the same as attacking someone, that protecting your truth isn't cruel, that refusing to be used doesn't make you a monster. I was someone who'd learned that sometimes love looks like letting go, and sometimes strength looks like saying no, and sometimes justice looks like a cease and desist letter, backed by evidence and the will to see it through. My phone buzzed one more time. Another email. Not from Rebecca, from GoFundMe. Subject: regarding campaign report. Help Sarah walk again. My heart rate picked up. I opened it. Dear Mr. Chen, thank you for bringing the campaign Help Sarah Walk Again to our attention. After review of the information you provided, including video evidence suggesting potential misrepresentation of facts material to donor decisions, we have placed a temporary hold on the campaign pending further investigation. No funds will be distributed to the campaign organizer until this matter is resolved. Donors will be notified of the hold and given the option to request refunds. We take the integrity of our platform seriously and appreciate your diligence in reporting potential fraud. Someone had beaten Rebecca to it. Someone had already reported the campaign, had already provided evidence, had already set wheels in motion that I hadn't even known were turning. I stared at the email, trying to process what it meant. Then I remembered the envelope, the video left at my door by an unknown sender. Whoever had given me that evidence hadn't just been trying to inform me. They'd been trying to arm me, to give me the tools to fight back, and apparently, They'd been fighting on their own, too. I didn't know who, didn't know why. Didn't know if it was conscience or revenge or some other motivation I couldn't fathom. But standing there by the river, reading an email that meant Sarah's campaign was already dead in the water, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Gratitude. Not for the mysterious benefactor, though I was grateful, but for the universe, for evidence, for truth having weight, for the fact that lies, no matter how well crafted, couldn't stand forever when confronted with facts. I looked out at the river one more time, watching it flow toward the ocean, patient and persistent and unstoppable. Then, I headed home to wait for the fallout, because this was just the beginning. The real storm was still coming. And for the first time since Sarah had called me 2 weeks ago, I felt ready for it. More than ready. I was looking forward to it. The 72 hours felt like 72 years. Rebecca sent the cease and desist letter at exactly 5 p.m. on Friday, timing it so Sarah and Jessica would receive it going into the weekend, maximum time to panic, minimum access to immediate legal counsel. It was strategic, calculated, the kind of psychological warfare that happens in conference rooms and law offices instead of battlefields, but leaves casualties just the same. I tried to go about my normal life, tried to focus on work, on my app, on the coffee date I had scheduled with Emma for Saturday morning, but everything felt surreal, like I was moving through a dream where the familiar had become strange, where every moment was weighted with anticipation of the explosion I knew was coming. Friday night, I worked on Project Horizon, debugging a feature that had been giving me trouble for weeks. The code was stubborn, refusing to cooperate, and normally that would have frustrated me. Instead, I found it soothing a problem with a solution, a challenge that could be overcome with logic and patience and enough trial and error. Unlike human relationships, unlike reputation damage, unlike the court of public opinion, where facts mattered less than feelings, and evidence was no match for a good victim narrative. At 11 p.m., my phone lit up with a notification. Not a call, a text from an unknown number. Unknown. You fucking bastard. You're suing a paralyzed woman? You're actually going to take her to court? I hope you rot in hell. I stared at it, feeling nothing, just emptiness where anger should have been. They'd received the letter, and instead of complying, instead of taking down the lies and issuing retractions, they were doubling down, spreading the news, rallying their forces. More texts came in rapid succession. Unknown. Sarah is crying because of you. She's terrified. She thought you were just heartless, but you're actually evil. Unknown. Lawyer up all you want. Everyone can see what you really are. No amount of legal threats will change the fact that you're a monster. Unknown. I donated to her campaign and I donate again. We're not going to let you bully her into silence. I blocked the numbers methodically, one by one, feeling strangely detached from the vitriol. These people didn't know me, didn't know the truth. They'd read a story, chosen a side, and now they were invested in that narrative regardless of evidence. You can't reason with that. Can't argue with it, can only document it and move forward. I took screenshots of everything before blocking, sent them to Rebecca with a simple message. The cease and desist has been received. They're not complying. Her response came immediately despite the late hour. Perfect. This gives us exactly what we need. Don't respond to anyone. Let them dig their own graves. I went to bed around midnight but didn't sleep. Just lay there listening to the city sounds, sirens, car horns, the distant bass from someone's party, and thought about the strangeness of modern warfare. How you could destroy someone from behind a keyboard. How truth and lies traveled at the same speed through fiber optic cables. How a reputation built over a lifetime could be dismantled in the time it took to write a Facebook post. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold. The kind of Portland weather that makes you question why anyone lives here, until you remember that this is the price you pay for summer days so perfect they feel like they belong to someone else's life. I met Emma at a cafe near Powell's Books, one of those places that smells like espresso and fresh pastries and has mismatched furniture that's somehow more comfortable than anything you could buy new. She was already there, reading what looked like a graduate-level mathematics textbook and making notes in the margins with a mechanical pencil. When she saw me, she closed the book and smiled. And something about that smile, genuine, unforced, uncomplicated by ulterior motives or hidden agendas, made my chest ache with something that might have been hope or might have been grief for all the uncomplicated moments I'd lost. "You look tired," she said as I sat down. "Didn't sleep well," I admitted. "Work stuff?" I hesitated. We'd had such easy, pleasant conversations so far. Bringing Sarah into this space felt like contamination, like introducing poison into something clean and good. But Emma was looking at me with genuine concern, and I realized I was tired of hiding, tired of pretending everything was fine, tired of carrying the weight of Sarah's lies alone. "Can I tell you something?" I said. "Something complicated and kind of ugly?" "Of course," she said, setting down her coffee cup and giving me her full attention. So I told her, not everything the full story would take hours, but the essentials. Sarah leaving, the accident, the request for help and my refusal, the GoFundMe campaign built on lies, the video evidence, the lawyer, the cease and desist letter, and the harassment that followed. Emma listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to concern to something harder, sharper anger on my behalf. "Let me get this straight," she said when I finished. "Your ex-wife, who left you for another man and didn't contact you for 3 years, called you after her boyfriend died and asked you to become her caretaker. You said no, which is completely reasonable. And now she's running a fundraising campaign that paints you as an abusive ex who abandoned her out of spite?" "That's the summary, yeah. And you have video evidence of her and her friends explicitly planning to lie about you for money?" "Yes." Emma sat back, shaking her head slowly. "Daniel, that's not just unethical. That's fraud. That's defamation. That's—" She stopped, seeming to search for adequate words. "That's absolutely unconscionable." The validation hit harder than I'd expected. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone uninvolved, someone with no stake in the outcome, to hear the facts and confirm that I wasn't crazy, wasn't cruel, wasn't the villain Sarah's campaign had painted me as. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For not immediately assuming I'm the bad guy, for listening to my side. You'd be surprised how many people don't." Emma reached across the table and took my hand. The gesture was simple, friendly, but the contact sent electricity up my arm that had nothing to do with static and everything to do with the fact that I'd been touch-starved for 3 years, had forgotten what it felt like to have someone reach for you with kindness instead of demands. Anyone who knows you for 5 minutes could tell you're not capable of the things she's accusing you of, Emma said firmly. "You're one of the kindest people I've ever met, Daniel. The fact that you're defending yourself doesn't change that. It just means you've learned that kindness to yourself matters as much as kindness to others." I felt something crack in my chest, some final piece of armor I hadn't realized I was still wearing. "I keep wondering if I'm doing the right thing," I admitted. "If pursuing legal action makes me the person she's accusing me of being. If I'm just proving her point that I'm vindictive, cruel, willing to hurt a disabled woman to protect my ego." "You're not protecting your ego," Emma said. "You're protecting your truth. There's a difference. She's the one who chose to lie. You're just choosing not to let those lies stand unchallenged. That's not cruelty. That's self-preservation." We sat there for a moment, her hand still covering mine, and I felt something shift, not just in how I saw the situation, but in how I saw myself. I'd been so focused on not becoming the villain that I'd almost lost sight of the fact that defending yourself doesn't make you the bad guy. It just makes you someone who understands that your life, your reputation, your peace of mind are worth fighting for. "Thank you," I said again, "for understanding, for not running away from all this drama." Emma laughed, but it was gentle, not mocking. "Please, I'm a mathematician. I live for problems with complex variables and messy solutions. This is just applied ethics instead of applied mathematics." She squeezed my hand once before letting go. "Besides, I like you, drama and all. Actually, I think I like you more knowing you're willing to stand up for yourself. It's attractive." The word hung there between us, attractive, and suddenly the air felt different, charged with possibility that had nothing to do with legal battles and everything to do with the way she was looking at me. The way I was looking at her, the way the world seemed to narrow down to just this table, this moment, this connection. My phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Rebecca's name on the screen? "I should take this," I said apologetically. Emma nodded. "Of course. I'll order us more coffee." I stepped outside into the cold morning air, answered the call. "Daniel," Rebecca said, and there was something in her voice, satisfaction, mixed with barely contained excitement. "We need to meet. Now, if possible. Something's happened." "What kind of something?" "The good kind. Can you come to my office?" I glanced back through the window at Emma, who was at the counter ordering. "I'm actually with someone right now." "Bring them," Rebecca said. "This won't take long. And honestly, you're going to want a friendly face when I tell you what I found." 30 minutes later, Emma and I were sitting in Rebecca's office, the same chairs I'd occupied just 2 days ago, but the energy in the room was completely different. Rebecca looked like someone who'd just won the lottery and was trying to maintain professional composure while internally celebrating. She had multiple folders spread across her desk and her laptop, open to what looked like financial documents. "So," she said, leaning back in her chair with the satisfied expression of a cat who'd caught a particularly large mouse. "Remember how I said we'd subpoena Sarah's financial records if this went to trial?" I nodded. "I didn't have to. Someone sent them to me, anonymously. Left them at my office in an envelope with a note that said, 'You'll want to see this.'" She turned her laptop around so we could see the screen. "Take a look." The document was a bank statement. Sarah Morrison's account from the last 6 months. My eyes scanned the numbers, not immediately understanding what I was looking at. Then I saw it. Regular deposits, every 2 weeks, from Marcus Reeves, amounts ranging from $2,000 to $5,000. She was receiving money from Marcus, Rebecca said, substantial amounts, consistently, for at least 6 months before the accident. "So," I said, not following, "they were together. Maybe he was helping with bills, or—" "Look at the dates," Rebecca interrupted, pointing to specific transactions. "These deposits started in January. The accident was in October. But look at this." She pulled out another document, a lease agreement for an apartment in Seattle, co-signed by Sarah Morrison and Marcus Reeves. Start date, February 1st. "They were living together," Rebecca said, "in Seattle, in a luxury apartment with rent of $4,500 a month. Marcus was paying the majority of it based on these bank transfers, but Sarah was contributing. She had income. She had shared assets with Marcus. She wasn't some abandoned, destitute woman with nowhere to turn." Emma leaned forward, studying the documents. "Wait, if they were living together, what about Marcus's life insurance? Wouldn't she be the beneficiary?" Rebecca's smile widened. "Excellent question. And the answer is yes. Marcus had a life insurance policy through his employer, $500,000. Sarah is listed as the beneficiary. The payout was processed 3 weeks ago." The room went silent as the implications settled over us like fog. "She has $500,000, I said slowly. "From Marcus's life insurance, correct. And she started a GoFundMe campaign, saying she had no resources, no support, nothing to help her through this crisis. Also correct. That's fraud," Emma said flatly. "That's explicit, provable fraud. She lied to donors about her financial situation to solicit money she didn't actually need." Rebecca nodded. "It's more than fraud. It's a pattern of deception. She claimed to be destitute while sitting on $500,000. She claimed to have no support system while having shared assets and a life insurance payout. She claimed her ex-husband, that's you, Daniel, abandoned her in her time of need, while deliberately concealing the fact that she had substantial financial resources and had made no attempt to contact you in 3 years prior to the accident. How did our mysterious benefactor get all this?" I asked. "That," Rebecca said, "is a very good question. My guess? Someone close to Sarah who got tired of the lies. Maybe a friend who saw the campaign and knew about the life insurance. Maybe a family member of Marcus's who's angry that Sarah's profiting from his death while pretending to be destitute. Maybe someone with access to financial records who decided to be a whistleblower. Doesn't matter. What matters is we have it, it's authentic, and it destroys her entire narrative. I sat back, trying to process, trying to reconcile the Sarah I'd known or thought I'd known with this version who could lie so calculatedly, so completely, to strangers who were trying to help her. What do we do with this? I asked. We amend our cease and desist letter, Rebecca said. We include this evidence. We give them a new deadline 24 hours instead of 72. We make it abundantly clear that if they don't comply, we're not just suing for defamation. We're reporting her to the authorities for wire fraud, to GoFundMe for violating their terms of service, and we're releasing all of this information publicly so every donor knows they were lied to. That'll destroy her, I said quietly. She tried to destroy you first, Rebecca pointed out. This is just truth, facts, evidence. If the truth destroys her campaign, that's on her for building it on lies. Emma's hand found mine again, squeezing gently. You don't have to do this, she said softly. You could still walk away. Let karma handle it. Focus on your life. I thought about that, about walking away, about being the bigger person, about choosing peace over justice. Then I thought about the article calling me abusive, about Jessica's voice on that video, calculating how much money they could extract from my destroyed reputation, about every person who donated thinking they were helping a victim when they were actually funding a lie. She made this choice, I said. She chose to lie about me. She chose to weaponize her disability to paint me as a villain. She chose to profit from it while sitting on $500,000. I'm not destroying her. I'm just refusing to let her destroy me. Rebecca nodded approvingly. Then we move forward. I'll send the amended letter today. I'll also contact GoFundMe directly with this evidence to ensure the campaign stays frozen. And Daniel? She fixed me with a serious look. Be prepared. When this gets out, and it will get out, things are going to get ugly before they get better. Sarah's going to double down, or she's going to collapse. Either way, there's going to be fallout. I'm ready, I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. We left Rebecca's office 20 minutes later, stepping out into afternoon light that had broken through the clouds, turning the wet streets golden. That was intense, Emma said, walking close beside me. Yeah, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? I considered the question. How was I feeling? Vindicated? Angry? Sad? All of those and none of those? Like I'm doing the right thing. I said finally. Maybe not the nice thing. Maybe not the thing that makes me look good to people who don't know the full story, but the right thing. The true thing. Emma stopped walking, turned to face me fully. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. It takes courage to defend yourself, when the easier path is to just absorb the damage and move on. Or incredibly stubborn, I said, trying to lighten the moment. That too, she agreed, smiling. Then more seriously. Daniel, can I ask you something? Anything. When this is over, when the legal stuff is settled and Sarah's campaign is dealt with and you've protected your reputation, what then? What do you want? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the immediate crisis, on defense and evidence and legal strategy, that I hadn't thought much about what came after. I want my life back, I said. Not the one I had with Sarah. That's gone, and honestly, I don't want it back. But the one I've been building, the app, the gym. Friends, maybe. I hesitated looking at her. Maybe more than friends, if the right person came along. Emma's smile was slow, warm, full of promise. That sounds like a good plan. Yeah? Yeah. She glanced at her watch. I have to get to campus office hours with students. But Daniel, thank you for trusting me with all this, for letting me in instead of shutting me out. Thank you for not running away, screaming. She laughed. Please. I teach calculus to freshmen. This is nothing. We said goodbye, and I watched her walk away, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time settle over me like a comfortable jacket. Not just hope, but certainty. Certainty that I was going to be okay, that defending myself wasn't wrong, that the life I was building was worth protecting. That truth, backed by evidence and spoken with courage, was stronger than any lie. Even the ones told by people you used to love. My phone buzzed. An email from Rebecca. Subject line: amended, cease and desist, sent. It was happening. Really happening. And for the first time since Sarah's initial call, I felt ready for whatever came next. Bring on the storm. I'd learned how to stand in the rain. Time moves differently when you're waiting for an explosion. The amended cease and desist letter went out Saturday at 2 p.m., giving Sarah and Jessica until 2 p.m. Sunday to respond. 24 hours to decide whether to admit fault, take down the lies, and fade into obscurity, or to fight and face the full force of evidence, legal action, and public exposure. I spent Saturday evening working on my app, trying to lose myself in code, but every line I wrote felt like it was being typed by someone else's hands. My mind kept drifting to Sarah, to what she must be feeling reading that letter, seeing the financial documents, realizing that someone close to her had betrayed her, or maybe, from her perspective, betrayed her again. Since I was the original betrayer in her narrative, the husband who'd had the audacity to refuse to sacrifice himself on the altar of her needs. Around 9 p.m., my phone rang. My mother. I stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering, already bracing for the conversation. "Daniel," she said, and her voice was different than the last time we'd spoken, quieter, less certain. "I need to talk to you about something." "Okay," I said carefully. "Sarah's GoFundMe campaign. I saw it. I donated. Of course she had. Of course my own mother had given money to the woman who'd destroyed me, had believed Sarah's lies over her own son's truth." "I know," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "A lot of people did. But then I got an email from GoFundMe saying the campaign is under investigation for potential fraud, saying donors can request refunds. Daniel, what's going on?" I took a breath, let it out slowly, considered how much to tell her. "Sarah lied," I said simply. "She told donors she had no resources, no support, nothing to help her through this crisis. But she has $500,000 from Marcus's life insurance. She was living with him in a luxury apartment in Seattle. She wasn't destitute or abandoned. She just wanted more money and was willing to destroy my reputation to get it." Silence. The kind that feels like the pause before a verdict. "How do you know this?" Mom asked finally. "Financial records, bank statements, lease agreements, insurance documents, all of it verified, all of it proving she deliberately lied to donors about her situation." Another pause, longer this time. "She told me you were abusive," Mom said quietly. "That you were controlling during the marriage. That leaving you was the hardest thing she ever did, but necessary for her mental health." I believed her, Daniel. I believed that you'd changed, that maybe I didn't know my own son as well as I thought. The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples of hurt that spread through my chest. "And now?" I asked. "Now I don't know what to believe," she admitted. "But I know my son, and the son I raised doesn't deserve what's being said about him. So I need you to tell me, honestly, truly, were you ever controlling? Were you ever manipulative or abusive in any way?" "No," I said firmly. "Never. I loved her, Mom. Maybe too much. Maybe in ways that made me ignore warning signs or compromise too often. But I never tried to control her. Never manipulated her. Never raised a hand to her, or threatened her, or did anything that could remotely be called abusive. The worst thing I ever did was love someone who didn't love me back the same way." I heard her breathe out, long and shaky. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have asked you first, should have heard your side before believing hers, should have trusted that I raised you better than to be the person she described." "It's okay," I said, and meant it. "She's convincing. She has the perfect victim narrative, paralyzed woman abandoned by cruel ex-husband. It's simple, clear, easy to believe. The truth is more complicated. What happens now? Now we wait, I said. She has until tomorrow afternoon to take down the campaign and issue a public retraction. If she doesn't, my lawyer files suit for defamation and fraud. And all of this, the financial records, the life insurance, the evidence of deliberate lying, becomes public record. That will destroy her, Mom said. She tried to destroy me first, I said, echoing Rebecca's words. This is just truth. Mom was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. For standing up for yourself. For not just taking it because it's easier. That takes courage. The words shouldn't have mattered so much. I was a grown man. I didn't need my mother's approval, but they did. They mattered enormously. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. We talked for another few minutes about other things. Her garden, her book club, normal life continuing, despite the drama, and when we hung up, I felt lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying her disappointment without realizing it and had finally set it down. Sunday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, the kind that makes Portland feel almost Mediterranean, like maybe we're not just a city of rain and clouds and perpetual gray. I went to the gym, pushed through a brutal workout with Marcus, the trainer, who seemed to sense I needed to exhaust myself, to turn mental anxiety into physical exertion, until my body was too tired to sustain the nervous energy humming through my veins. Whatever you're dealing with, he said as I finished my last set of deadlifts, muscles shaking. You're handling it. I can see it in how you move. More confident, more grounded. Keep that energy. I showered, changed, grabbed coffee from a place near my apartment, checked my phone obsessively even though I knew it was too early, knew Sarah wouldn't respond until the last possible moment if she responded at all. At 1 p.m., Emma texted, "Thinking about you today. How are you holding up? Nervous. Deadline is in an hour. Want company? I can come over. Or we can meet somewhere. Whatever you need." I looked around my apartment neat, organized, the space I'd built for myself in the aftermath of Sarah leaving. It felt like letting Emma in here would be significant somehow, would be crossing a threshold from casual dating to something more intentional. But maybe that's what I needed. Maybe isolation had protected me for 3 years, and now it was time to let someone in. My place? I'll send you the address. Be there in 20. Be there in 20. She arrived with Thai food pad Thai and spring rolls from the restaurant where we'd had dinner, comfort food that somehow made the waiting easier. We ate sitting on my couch, the TV on but muted, some nature documentary about penguins that neither of us were actually watching. Instead, we talked about everything except the looming deadline, her research, my app, a book she was reading, a podcast I'd started listening to. Normal things. Human things. The kind of conversation that reminded me that life was bigger than this moment, that win or lose, the world would keep spinning and I would still have work and friends and possibilities. At 1:50, my phone was silent. At 1:55, still nothing. At 1:59, Emma reached over and took my hand. "Whatever happens," she said, "you did the right thing." 2 p.m. My phone remained silent. 2:05, nothing. At 2:07, Rebecca called. "They didn't respond," she said without preamble. No takedown, no retraction, no communication whatsoever, which means we move forward. I'm filing the lawsuit tomorrow morning. Defamation, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress. I'm also submitting a formal complaint to the Washington State Attorney General's office regarding wire fraud and providing all evidence to GoFundMe for permanent campaign removal and potential criminal referral. "Okay," I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Daniel, are you sure? This is the point of no return. Once I file, this becomes public record. The media might pick it up. Your life becomes an open book for anyone who wants to read it." I looked at Emma, who was watching me with steady, supportive eyes, thought about my mother's apology, about Rebecca's confidence, about the anonymous benefactor who'd given me the evidence, about every person who'd called me heartless without knowing the truth. "I'm sure," I said. "File it." "Okay then," Rebecca said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "Let's show them what happens when you build a house on lies." She hung up. I set down my phone, looked at Emma. "It's happening," I said. "It's happening," she confirmed. And then, unexpectedly, I started laughing. Not hysterical laughter, not bitter or angry, just genuine, surprised laughter at the absurdity of it all, that I was sitting on my couch eating Thai food with a woman I was falling for while preparing to sue my ex-wife for trying to profit from calling me abusive. That my life had become a narrative so complicated it would seem ridiculous if it weren't actually happening. Emma started laughing too, and suddenly we were both doubled over, tears streaming, finding humor in the darkness, because sometimes that's all you can do when life becomes too strange to process any other way. When we finally caught our breath, Emma wiped her eyes and said, "You know what? Fuck her." End quote. The profanity sounded strange coming from her. She was usually so measured, so academic, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. "Fuck her," I agreed. "You offered her everything when you were married. You would have given her the world. She chose to leave. That was her right. But trying to destroy you 3 years later because you won't clean up the mess she made? That's just cruel. And cruel people don't get to win just because they're also suffering." "Thank you," I said, "for being here, for understanding, for not thinking I'm a monster." "You're not a monster," Emma said firmly. "You're just someone who finally learned that you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. That's not being cruel. That's called survival." We spent the rest of the afternoon together, watched the Penguin documentary, talked about nothing important, existed in the strange liminal space between the old crisis and the new one, between the fear of what Sarah might do and the certainty that whatever she did, I'd survive it. Around 6, Emma left with a kiss on my cheek that felt like a promise, like a bookmark in a story we were still writing. I spent the evening alone, trying to relax, trying not to obsessively check my phone or refresh social media to see if news of the lawsuit had somehow leaked early. At 11 p.m., as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed. Not Rebecca, not Sarah, not any of the numbers I'd blocked. An email from an address I didn't recognize. Email protected. Subject line: "You deserve to know." I opened it with trembling fingers. "Daniel, you don't know me, but I know Sarah. I'm the one who sent you the video. I'm the one who sent the financial records to your lawyer. I'm the one who's been trying to give you the tools to defend yourself. I need you to know why. My name is Marcus's sister. After he died, Sarah came to the funeral and cried, and played the grieving girlfriend while sitting on his life insurance money and planning her fundraising campaign. She told my parents that Marcus would have wanted her to be taken care of, that he'd talked about taking care of her always, that she was his future. But I found his journal, his private journal, that he kept on his laptop, and in it, he wrote about you, about how guilty he felt for what they'd done, about how Sarah talked about you constantly, compared him to you, made him feel like he was competing with a ghost, about how she'd told him she regretted leaving you, that you were the good one, the stable one, the one who would have actually stayed. He wrote that she was using him, that he was fun and exciting but you were home, that she kept his apartment separate from hers even though they were supposedly living together because she wanted an escape route. He wrote 3 weeks before the accident that he thought she was going to leave him and try to get you back. Then he died. And suddenly, you were the villain in her story, instead of the man she regretted losing. I couldn't stand it. Couldn't watch her profit from lies while my brother's memory got twisted into some romantic tragedy when the truth was he died knowing she didn't really love him. So I gave you the evidence, because you deserve the truth, and because my brother deserved better than to be remembered as part of a lie. I'm sorry for what she did to you, both of you, and I hope you win. Rachel Reeves. I read the email 3 times, each time feeling the pieces shift and rearrange into a picture I hadn't fully seen before. Sarah hadn't just left me for Marcus. She'd been comparing us, had regretted it, had been planning to come back. And then the accident had changed everything, had taken away her chance to return, had left her paralyzed and dependent, had transformed regret into resentment, because I was supposed to be her backup plan and I'd had the audacity to move on. The GoFundMe campaign wasn't just about money. It was about punishment, about making me pay for not being available when she finally decided she wanted me back. I replied to Rachel's email. Rachel, thank you for telling me. Thank you for the evidence. Thank you for believing I deserved to know the truth. I'm sorry about your brother. I'm sorry he was caught in the middle of this. I'm sorry for all of it. But I'm grateful to you. You gave me the tools to defend myself when I thought I was going to drown in lies. If there's ever anything I can do for you, anything at all, please let me know. Daniel. I sent it, then sat there in the darkness of my bedroom, processing. Marcus had known, had felt guilty, had died carrying that guilt. Sarah had regretted leaving, had been planning to come back. And I had moved on, had built a life, had learned my worth and refused to compromise it even when she came asking. That's what she couldn't forgive. Not that I wouldn't help her, but that I didn't need her anymore, that I'd become someone who could say no. The irony was sharp enough to cut. She'd left me to find herself, to pursue excitement and passion and whatever Marcus represented, and in doing so, she'd freed me to find myself too, to become someone stronger, someone whole. Someone who couldn't be manipulated by guilt or obligation or the memory of love that had only ever been one-sided. Monday morning, Rebecca filed the lawsuit. By noon, it had hit the local news. Man sues paralyzed ex-wife over allegedly fraudulent GoFundMe campaign. The headline was designed to make me look like a monster who sues a paralyzed woman, but the article itself, when you actually read it, told the real story. It included excerpts from the lawsuit, references to the financial evidence, mention of the life insurance payout. The comments section was predictably vicious, split between people calling me heartless and people calling Sarah a fraud. But buried in the vitriol were a few comments that mattered. If she has $500K from life insurance, why does she need GoFundMe money? That's literally fraud. Everyone is acting like being paralyzed gives you the right to lie about your ex. It doesn't. I donated to this campaign and feel completely betrayed. She lied about her financial situation. The tide was turning. Slowly, messily, but turning. By evening, the story had been picked up by a few national outlets, reframed with more nuance, more focus on the fraud angle than the disabled woman sued angle. Rebecca called at 7. GoFundMe officially shut down the campaign, she said. They're refunding all donors and banning Sarah from the platform. They've also referred the matter to the FTC for investigation into wire fraud. What does that mean for her? It means she's potentially facing federal charges on top of our civil suit. It means this got real very quickly. It means her lawyer, if she has one, is probably telling her to settle immediately before this gets any worse. Will she? I don't know, Rebecca admitted. Pride makes people do stupid things. So does desperation. We'll see. That night, I got one final message from Sarah's number, which I'd blocked, but which still showed up as a notification that I could choose to view or ignore. I chose to view it. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed me completely. I have nothing left. No money, no campaign, no reputation, no future. All because you couldn't forgive me for making one mistake 3 years ago.
I hope it was worth it, Daniel. I hope destroying me makes you feel like a man.
I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed my response. I didn't destroy you, Sarah. I just refused to let you destroy me. There's a difference. What you're experiencing now isn't my revenge. It's just the natural consequences of your choices, leaving me, lying about me, trying to profit from those lies. None of this would have happened if you'd just told the truth. If you'd been honest with donors about your financial situation, if you'd owned your choices instead of making me the villain in a story you wrote to avoid accountability, I don't hate you. I don't wish you harm. But I also don't owe you my life, my resources, or my silence when you tried to destroy my reputation. You made your choices. I made mine. Now we both live with them. Goodbye, Sarah. I sent it. Then I blocked her number permanently, deleted the thread, and finally let her go. Not with anger, not with bitterness, just with the quiet certainty that some chapters end, whether you want them to or not, and the only choice you have is whether to keep rereading them or turn the page. I was turning the page. Whatever came next, legal battles, public opinion, the slow grinding machinery of justice, I'd face it, knowing I'd told the truth. And that was enough. 3 weeks passed, like water over stones, steady, inevitable, wearing down the sharp edges, until what remained was smooth and manageable. The lawsuit moved forward with the mechanical precision of legal machinery. Rebecca filed motions. Sarah's newly acquired lawyer filed counter-motions. Discovery began, which meant both sides requesting documents and evidence and building their cases for a trial that everyone knew would probably never happen. Because the truth was, Sarah couldn't win. Not really. The evidence was too damning, too clear, too indisputable. The video of her friends planning the fraud campaign, the financial records showing $500,000 she'd hidden from donors, the lease agreement proving she'd been living in luxury while claiming destitution. Her only real option was to settle, to minimize damage, to make this go away as quietly as possible before it destroyed what little she had left. But pride is a strange thing. It makes you hold on to losing hands, double down on bad bets, fight battles you've already lost just to avoid admitting defeat. Sarah's pride kept her fighting for 3 weeks, until it didn't. Rebecca called me on a Wednesday afternoon, her voice carrying that particular quality that meant news, significant news. "They want to settle," she said. I was at work, sitting in a conference room between meetings, and the words took a moment to fully register. Sarah wants to settle? Her lawyer does. Smart woman, actually. She knows they can't win this. She's trying to salvage what she can before it gets worse. They're proposing terms. End quote. Which she's not without. End quote process. End quote. She's stout. End quote. She knows they're comparent. Who's also subscribe. What kind of terms? Rebecca outlined them. Sarah would issue a public retraction and apology, admitting she'd misrepresented her financial situation to donors. She'd pay my legal fees $40,000 and counting. She'd agree to a permanent injunction preventing her from making any further defamatory statements about me. And she'd admit, in a signed legal document, that I had no obligation to provide care or support to her, that our marriage had ended due to her infidelity, and that my refusal to help was neither cruel nor unreasonable. What do they want in return? I asked. They want you to agree not to pursue criminal fraud charges, not to provide evidence to federal prosecutors. Basically, they want this to end as a civil matter with a settlement instead of becoming a criminal case that could land her in prison. Prison. The word hung there, heavy with implications. Sarah, in prison, paralyzed, in a federal facility, paying for fraud with years of her life. The old Daniel would have felt guilty at the thought, would have immediately agreed to the settlement to spare her that fate, would have convinced himself that compassion meant protecting her from consequences. The new Daniel understood that consequences and cruelty weren't the same thing. What do you recommend? I asked. Honestly, take the settlement. You get everything you wanted. Public admission of wrongdoing, legal fees covered, protection from future defamation, and formal acknowledgement that you did nothing wrong. You avoid a trial, which would be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally exhausting, and you get to move on with your life. But she avoids criminal charges. She does. But Daniel, she's paralyzed and broke. The life insurance money is gone. Her lawyer let slip that medical bills and immediate expenses, depleted most of it. She's facing a future of disability, limited employment options, and the public record of this settlement following her forever. She's not getting away with anything. She's just avoiding the absolute worst-case scenario. I thought about it, about Sarah in prison, about whether I wanted that, whether I needed that level of revenge to feel vindicated. I didn't. What I needed was for the lies to stop, for the truth to be acknowledged, for my reputation to be cleared, and my peace to be protected. The settlement gave me all of that. Okay, I said. I'll take it. You're sure? I'm sure. Let's end this. Rebecca drew up the settlement agreement. Both sides signed. The legal battle that had consumed 3 weeks of my life ended not with a dramatic courtroom confrontation, but with signatures on documents and wire transfers of money. The public retraction went up on Sarah's Facebook page, the same page where she'd promoted her GoFundMe campaign 3 days later. I need to address my recent fundraising campaign and statements made about my ex-husband, Daniel Chen. I misrepresented my financial situation to donors. At the time of the campaign, I had significant resources from life insurance and other sources that I did not disclose. I apologized to everyone who donated, believing I had no means of support. I also made false and harmful statements about Daniel, suggesting he was abusive or had abandoned me in my time of need. These statements were untrue. Our marriage ended due to my infidelity. Daniel had no obligation to provide care to me, and his decision not to do so was neither cruel nor unreasonable. I regret any harm my statements caused to his reputation. I take full responsibility for my actions and apologize to Daniel and to all donors who trusted me. It wasn't everything. It didn't capture the full scope of the manipulation, the calculated nature of the fraud, the deliberate weaponization of disability to profit from lies. But it was enough. The comments came quickly, a mix of vindication and recrimination. I donated $200 to this. I want my money back. So you lied about being broke and lied about your ex being abusive? Unbelievable. This is why I never donate to GoFundMe campaigns. Too easy to scam people. I feel terrible for you being paralyzed, but that doesn't excuse fraud. I read them once, then closed the browser. Their anger, their judgment, their opinions, none of it mattered anymore. The truth was out. That was enough. Emma came over that night. I'd told her about the settlement, about the retraction, about the end of it all. She brought wine and Chinese food and that easy presence that had become essential to me over the past month, the sense that with her, I could just be myself. Could be happy or sad or complicated without having to perform or pretend or protect. How does it feel? She asked, as we sat on my couch. Cartons of lo mein and kung pao chicken spread across the coffee table. Strange, I admitted. I thought I'd feel more triumphant, maybe, like I'd won something. But mostly, I just feel tired, ready for it to be over. It is over, she pointed out gently. I know. It's just I spent 3 years rebuilding myself after she left. Then these past few weeks rebuilding again after she tried to destroy me. And now I'm just tired of rebuilding. I want to build something new, instead of constantly repairing what got broken. Emma set down her wine glass and turned to face me fully. So build something new. You have your app. You have your job. You have your life. What else do you want? The question hung there, simple but profound. What did I want? I looked at Emma, brilliant, funny, kind Emma, who'd stood by me through this mess, who'd never once made me feel weak for defending myself or cruel for refusing to be used. This, I said. I want this. You. Us. Whatever this is becoming. Her smile was soft, genuine. This is me, officially asking if you want to be my boyfriend. Because I'm tired of pretending I'm casual about you when I'm really not casual at all. The word boyfriend should have scared me. Should have triggered all the defenses I'd built, all the walls designed to keep me safe from the kind of hurt Sarah had caused. Instead, it felt right. Natural, like the next chapter in a story that was finally mine to write. Yes, I said. I want that. I want you. She kissed me then, soft and certain, and for the first time in 3 years I felt something settle in my chest that wasn't armor or scar tissue, but just peace. We spent the rest of the evening talking about the future. Her research, my app launch, plans for the holidays, small everyday things that mattered, precisely because they were small and everyday and normal. Later, after Emma left and I was alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop and pulled up Project Horizon. The app was ready. Actually ready. Beta testing complete. Bugs fixed. Interface polished. All that remained was to launch it, to put it out into the world and see if the thing I'd built in the ruins of my marriage could actually help people. I scheduled the launch for the following Monday. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened the folder where I'd kept photos from my marriage to Sarah. Or rather, where I'd kept the shredded remains after my cathartic destruction weeks ago. But now there was a new folder. Not old photos, but screenshots. The retraction. The settlement agreement. Evidence not of a marriage that failed, but of a man who'd learned to defend himself. I created a new document, titled it Lessons. And I wrote, things I learned from Sarah Morrison. 1. Love is not enough if it's not reciprocated. 2. Being kind doesn't mean being weak. 3. You teach people how to treat you by what you're willing to accept. 4. Defending yourself isn't the same as attacking someone. 5. The truth, backed by evidence, is more powerful than any lie. 6. You can't control what people think of you, only what you know to be true about yourself. Number 7. Moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let the past define your future. 8. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is say no. I saved the document. Read it once more. These weren't just lessons about Sarah. They were lessons about myself, about who I'd become, about the person I'd had to learn to be in order to survive her leaving and survive her return. I'd spent 3 years thinking the lesson was about trust, about how to protect yourself from being hurt again. But the real lesson was simpler. You can't control whether people hurt you, but you can control whether you let that hurt define you. Sarah had hurt me, deeply, twice, but I was still here, still whole, still capable of love and trust and hope, still capable of building a life worth living. The settlement meant the legal battle was over. But the real victory, the one that actually mattered, was that I'd learned who I was when everything else was stripped away. I was someone who could stand in the ruins and build something new. Someone who could say no and mean it. Someone who could love again without losing himself. That was worth more than any legal settlement, any public retraction, any vindication in the court of public opinion. I'd won the only battle that ever really mattered. The battle for my own soul. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. 6 months later, I stood in front of a room full of nonprofit directors and community organizers, watching them explore Project Horizon for the first time. The app had launched quietly in December, but word spread the way good things do through whispers and recommendations, through people solving problems they'd struggled with for years, through the simple satisfaction of something that actually worked the way it promised to. Now, in late April, I was giving my first public demonstration at a conference for small nonprofits, watching people light up as they realized what the tool could do for their organizations. This is exactly what we needed. A woman from a youth literacy program said, her fingers moving across the demo tablet. We've been trying to track impact metrics for grant reports, but everything was either too expensive or too complicated. This is perfect. Perfect. The word echoed in my chest like a bell. Emma was in the audience, sitting in the back row, and when I caught her eye, she smiled proud, supportive, completely unsurprised that I'd built something people actually needed. We'd been together for 5 months now. Real together. Not casual dating, but actual relationship, meeting each other's friends, talking about the future, building something solid and healthy and uncomplicated by lies or hidden agendas. She'd moved some things into my apartment last month. A toothbrush first, then clothes, then books that now lined my shelves next to mine, creating a physical representation of lives intertwining. It felt right. Easy. Like this was how it had always been supposed to be. After the presentation, after the questions and the business cards exchanged and the promises to follow up, Emma and I walked through the city together, the spring air warm with the promise of summer. "I'm proud of you," she said, linking her arm through mine. "You built something beautiful, something that matters." "We built something beautiful," I corrected, squeezing her hand. "I couldn't have done this without you." That night, alone in my apartment, our apartment now, really, I thought about the dinner table where this had all started, about Sarah telling me she was leaving, about the man I'd been then, broken and confused and convinced that her leaving meant something was fundamentally wrong with him. I understood now that her leaving had nothing to do with my worth and everything to do with her choices. I understood that you could love someone completely and still not be enough for them. Not because you were deficient, but because they were looking for something you were never meant to provide. I understood that the greatest act of self-love is refusing to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's vision of who you should be. Sarah had taught me that, though not in the way she'd intended. She'd taught me by leaving, by lying, by trying to destroy me when I wouldn't save her. She'd taught me that I was stronger than I knew, that boundaries weren't cruelty, that saying no was sometimes the most honest thing you could do. I didn't hate her anymore, didn't think about her much at all, actually. She was just a chapter in a story that had moved on to better things, to Emma and the app, and a life built on truth instead of compromise. If you've ever survived betrayal, you know this feeling. You know the moment when you realize you're not just surviving anymore, you're thriving. You're not just healing from what they did, you're grateful for what it taught you. I was grateful for the pain that made me stronger, for the loneliness that taught me to be whole alone, for the betrayal that showed me what I deserved. I was grateful for all of it, even the parts that nearly destroyed me, especially those, because they didn't destroy me, they rebuilt me into someone better, someone whole, someone ready for what came next. And what came next was beautiful.